The first time I realized my family wasn't as picture perfect as people thought was during a Thanksgiving dinner. Everyone else saw us as the model family. The smiling holiday cards, the matching sweaters, the carefully staged photos on social media. But behind those glossy images was a tension so thick you could cut it with a knife. That particular Thanksgiving, the dining table was set beautifully, candles flickering against polished silverware, the smell of roasted turkey filling the air. My mom had gone all out, as she always did. She had a way of making everything look effortless, even when I knew she'd spent the entire week scrubbing, cooking, and planning. My dad sat at the head of the table, carving knife in hand, making jokes that only half the family laughed at. My younger brother, Luke, fiddled with his phone under the table, pretending to listen. And then there was my sister, Emily. She was 2 years older than me, and for most of our lives, she'd been the golden child, the one with perfect grades, the flawless boyfriend, the scholarships, the charm that drew people in. But that year, she came home from college carrying a heaviness in her eyes that no amount of makeup could hide. At first, I thought I was the only one who noticed. But when she excused herself halfway through the meal, barely touching her plate, Mom followed her with a worried look. The sound of muffled voices carried down the hallway, growing sharper by the minute. My dad kept carving the turkey as though nothing was happening, his jaw tight, his smile fake. It wasn't until Emily came back, eyes red and puffy, that I realized this wasn't going to be another staged family dinner we could all laugh about later. Something was unraveling, and none of us were ready for it. After dinner, while everyone was distracted with dessert, Emily pulled me aside into the den. "Don't say anything," she whispered, her voice shaking. "But I can't stay here long." "What do you mean? You just got home." She shook her head, her blonde hair falling into her face. "It's bad, okay? I messed up. And Mom and Dad, they don't understand." I wanted to push her, to demand answers, but the desperation in her eyes stopped me. She wasn't just being dramatic. She was scared. And for the first time in my life, I saw my perfect sister as fragile, breakable, human. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing fragments of the argument between her and Mom. Words like responsibility, shame, and "you've ruined everything." The walls in our house weren't thick enough to block the sound of my family falling apart. Over the next few days, the tension only grew worse. Emily stayed locked in her room most of the time, leaving only when she had to. Dad acted like nothing was wrong, burying himself in work calls and sports highlights. Mom, on the other hand, seemed to hover constantly, alternating between smothering Emily with concern and snapping at her with cutting remarks. I felt stuck in the middle, too young to fix anything, too old to pretend I didn't understand what was happening. I wanted to help, but I didn't even know what the problem was. It wasn't until a week later, when I accidentally overheard a late-night conversation between my parents, that the truth came out. "She's pregnant, Mark," Mom said, her voice breaking. "Our daughter is 19 years old, and she's pregnant." Dad didn't answer right away. When he finally did, his voice was cold. "She's ruined her future. Everything we planned for her, everything we sacrificed, it's all gone." My heart dropped into my stomach. I stood frozen in the hallway, the words echoing in my head. Pregnant. Emily was pregnant. Suddenly, everything made sense. The tears, the arguments, the way she looked like she was carrying a weight too heavy for her shoulders. My perfect sister wasn't perfect anymore, and my parents weren't handling it well. The next morning, Emily caught me staring at her across the breakfast table. Her eyes narrowed. "You know, don't you?" I hesitated, then nodded. I heard them talking. Her lips trembled, but she didn't cry. Instead, she sighed, like she'd been waiting for this moment. "I don't know what I'm going to do," she admitted. "Mom wants me to, not have it. Dad barely looks at me. And I don't know." I reached across the table and grabbed her hand. "You're not alone. I don't know how to fix this, but I'll help however I can." For the first time in weeks, she smiled. It was small, shaky, but real. "Thanks. That means more than you know." From that day forward, I became her confidant. She told me about the guy, her ex-boyfriend, who bailed the moment she told him the news. She told me about the panic attacks she'd been having, the nights she couldn't sleep, the mornings she could barely get out of bed. She told me about the pressure from mom and dad, how they were pushing her to think about college, about her future, as though this new reality didn't exist. And the more she told me, the angrier I became. Not at her, but at them. My parents were so obsessed with appearances, with maintaining the image of the perfect family, that they were ignoring the fact that their daughter was terrified and needed them. One night, after another explosive argument between Emily and mom, I couldn't take it anymore. I confronted my parents in the living room, my hands shaking, but my voice steady. You guys need to stop treating her like a disappointment. She's your daughter. She's scared, and she needs support, not judgment. Mom looked at me like I'd grown two heads. You don't understand. This isn't about judgment. This is about her future. No, I shot back. This is about you. About your obsession with being the perfect family. Newsflash, nobody's perfect. Not Emily, not me, not you. So maybe it's time to stop pretending and start actually being there for her. For a moment, silence filled the room. Dad stared at me, his jaw tight. Mom's eyes welled with tears. And Emily, standing in the doorway, looked at me like I'd just thrown her a lifeline. That was the moment everything began to change. The car ride to my parents' house that evening was filled with a tense silence. Ryan had offered to come with me, but I told him I needed to handle this myself. My thoughts swirled like a storm cloud as I gripped the steering wheel. Every mile closer felt heavier. When I pulled into their driveway, I noticed the porch light flickering like it hadn't been replaced in months. That tiny detail hurt more than it should have. It was like a metaphor for how things had been neglected, not just around the house, but within our family. I knocked, though I had a key, and Mom opened the door almost immediately. She looked surprised, but also nervous. Dad was sitting in his recliner, his eyes darting toward me and then back to the muted TV. Dinner's in the oven, Mom said, almost robotic, like she was rehearsing lines from a play. I'm not here for dinner, I said softly. We need to talk. Dad finally looked at me, his jaw tightening. What about? You know what about? I said, trying to keep my voice calm. You've been avoiding my calls, ignoring my texts, and when I finally showed up last week, you pretended like everything was fine. But it's not fine. None of this is fine. Mom's hands shook as she folded them together. Dad leaned forward, elbows on his knees, the old leather creaking under his weight. What do you want me to say? The truth, I said, my throat tightening. Why did you push me away? Why have you been pushing us all away? For a moment, all I heard was the ticking of the clock above the fireplace. Then Dad exhaled long and shaky. I don't know how to be needed anymore, he said finally, his voice cracking. I blinked. Of all the answers I had prepared myself for, anger, denial, deflection, that was the last thing I expected. What do you mean? I asked. He rubbed his forehead. You grew up. You don't ask for my help with schoolwork or advice about jobs anymore. You built your own life. And your mom, she doesn't need me the way she used to either. I feel like I'm just here, taking up space. I felt my chest tighten. Dad, I still need you. Maybe not in the same ways as before, but I still need you in my life. You matter to me, to Mom, to Ryan. You're not just taking up space. Mom finally spoke, her voice soft. I've been trying to tell him that, but he doesn't believe me. Tears burned in my eyes. For so long, I thought the distance between us was about something I did wrong. But it wasn't. It was about his own fears. I walked over and knelt in front of him. Dad, you've always been the person I look up to. Even now, you don't have to fix everything for me anymore, but I still want you by my side. That doesn't change. He looked down at me, and for the first time in years, his eyes softened. The rest of the evening, we talked, really talked, about how he felt invisible, how Mom had been carrying the weight of trying to pull him back into the family, and how I had misread his silence as rejection when it was really his own insecurity. We cried, we laughed, and when I finally left that night, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Hope. A week later, Dad showed up at my apartment with tools in hand. Figure I'd help you fix that leaky faucet, he said. It wasn't about the faucet. It was about showing up again. And from then on, he did. He came around for Sunday dinners. He started taking walks with Mom, and slowly, the distance between us began to close. Sometimes healing doesn't come from big, dramatic moments. Sometimes It comes from a simple conversation where someone finally says, "I still need you." Like and subscribe if you believe in second chances within families. My sister decided she was the main character at my wedding, and I'm still picking up the pieces months later. That's the line I've repeated to myself and to friends more times than I can count. You know how people joke about someone stealing the spotlight? Well, my sister didn't just steal the spotlight. She hijacked the entire show. But before I dive into the nightmare that day became, let me back up a little and explain how we even got there. I grew up in what outsiders would probably call a picture-perfect family. Suburban house, dad who worked in finance, mom who ran the PDA, and two daughters who were just far enough apart in age to never really get along. I'm the older one, 3 years ahead of my sister, Hannah. For as long as I can remember, she's been competitive isn't even the right word. It was more like she saw everything in life as a contest, and the prize was always approval, attention, or validation. When I got my license, she complained that our parents celebrated me more than they would for her. When I got into my dream college, she cried for weeks because she felt like she'd never measure up. And when I got engaged, well, you can probably imagine how that went. The day my fiancé, Adam, proposed, I called my mom first. She cried happy tears, which was expected. When I called Hannah, she went quiet, like dead silent for a good 20 seconds. Then she said, "Wow, that's fast. Are you sure you're ready?" That should have been my first warning. At first, I brushed it off. I figured maybe she was shocked or caught off guard. But over the next year of planning, she made her attitude clear. Every conversation about the wedding turned into some passive-aggressive remark. "Do you really think that dress flatters you? You don't want to use that venue, do you? It's kind of cliche." Adam's family might think the menu is a little cheap. It wore me down, but I kept trying to include her. I even asked her to be my maid of honor, thinking that maybe the responsibility would make her feel important and involved. Big mistake, because from the second I gave her that title, Hannah treated the wedding like it was her event. She complained about the color scheme, she tried to change the playlist behind my back, and she even called one of my bridesmaids to say she should step down because she didn't look good in the dress. My bridesmaid told me everything, of course, and I confronted Hannah. She cried, claiming I was being unfair and that I always assumed the worst of her. Fast forward to the rehearsal dinner. Everything seemed fine until Hannah stood up to give an impromptu toast. And instead of celebrating Adam and me, she started rambling about how hard it's been living in someone else's shadow. In front of everyone, Adam squeezed my hand under the table, silently telling me not to cause a scene. But I'll be honest, I wanted to throw my wine glass at her. Still, I kept it together. I told myself, tomorrow is about me and Adam. Tomorrow is our day. She won't ruin it. I was so wrong. The morning of the wedding, Hannah was supposed to show up early with the bridesmaids to get ready together. Instead, she arrived 2 hours late, hair and makeup already done, wearing a silky white robe that looked way too much like a bridal robe. The photographer even mistook her for me at first glance and asked if she was ready for bridal portraits. My blood boiled, but I bit my tongue. Then came the ceremony. Everyone was seated, the music was playing, and my dad was about to walk me down the aisle. But just as the doors opened for me to make my entrance, Hannah stumbled dramatically in front of everyone. She fell to her knees, grabbed her ankle, and let out this wail like she'd been shot. The music stopped, the guests gasped, and all eyes were on her. The kicker? She wasn't even wearing heels. She had on low wedges. I froze. My dad whispered, "Just wait. She's making a scene." And sure enough, after 10 minutes of fussing and attention, Hannah miraculously stood up, said she could push through the pain, and limped off to the side. But by then, the moment was gone. My walk down the aisle felt less like a fairy tale and more like damage control. And it didn't stop there. At the reception, she grabbed the microphone before Adam, and I could even make her thank you speech. She launched into this long, drawn-out tribute about how hard life has been for her, how proud she was of herself for supporting me despite always being compared to me, and how one day she hoped people would celebrate her the way they celebrated me. Half the room sat in uncomfortable silence, while the other half awkwardly clapped because they didn't know what else to do. By the end of the night, she was dancing on tables, drinking champagne straight from the bottle, and crying in the bathroom because she claimed no one was paying enough attention to her. Adam's family was horrified. My parents were mortified. And me? I was furious, embarrassed, and heartbroken. Because my wedding day, the one day I'd dreamed about since I was a little girl, was completely overshadowed by my sister's antics. After the wedding, I cut her off. I stopped answering her calls, I unfollowed her on social media, and I told my parents I needed space. That's when the drama really exploded. My mom begged me to forgive her, saying, "She's your sister, and she just made mistakes." My dad, on the other hand, admitted Hannah had always been selfish, but urged me not to ruin the family over one day. One day. It wasn't just one day. It was a lifetime of her belittling me, competing with me, and making everything about her. The wedding was just the final straw. And now, months later, the fallout hasn't stopped. Hannah posts cryptic captions online about toxic siblings. My mom guilt trips me constantly. Adam says I need to decide whether I want peace or distance, but he supports me either way. And me? I'm stuck wondering if cutting off my own sister makes me the villain, or if she finally pushed me too far. When I said cutting off my sister caused fallout, I didn't even know the half of it. The weeks after the wedding turned into this twisted tug of war between my sanity and my family's expectations. At first, I thought keeping my distance from Hannah would give everyone time to cool off. I figured she'd eventually realize how badly she'd acted and maybe even, dare I say it, apologize. But nope. Instead, she doubled down in ways I couldn't even imagine. About 2 weeks after the wedding, my mom invited me over for dinner. Adam was working late, so I went alone, thinking it would just be a normal catch-up. The second I walked in, though, I knew I'd walked into a trap. Hannah was sitting at the dining table, arms crossed, smirking like a cat that had caught a mouse. "Surprise," my mom said nervously, clearly knowing I wasn't going to like this. "I thought it would be good for you two to talk." I wanted to walk right back out the door, but then Hannah leaned back in her chair, tilted her head, and said, "So, are you done throwing your little tantrum?" I swear I saw red. "Tantrum," I repeated, my voice cracking. "You hijacked my wedding. You embarrassed me in front of everyone I know, and you think I'm throwing a tantrum?" Hannah rolled her eyes. "You're being dramatic. Nobody remembers what happened. They were all there for you, not me. You're the only one still obsessing over it." My mom jumped in quickly. "Girls, please. Can't we just move forward?" But I wasn't having it. Move forward? She hasn't even acknowledged what she did. She ruined the most important day of my life, and you want me to just pretend it didn't happen? Hannah smirked again and said, "Maybe if you weren't so boring, people wouldn't have been looking at me." I stood up so fast my chair scraped against the floor. "You're unbelievable." I looked at my mom, who was wringing her hands, tears already welling up. "If you want me to keep coming around here, don't ever set me up like this again." Then I walked out. That night, Adam held me while I cried, repeating over and over, "You don't owe her forgiveness." And I believed him for a while. But the thing about family drama is that it seeps into everything. When Thanksgiving rolled around, Adam and I debated skipping it altogether. But my dad called, practically begging me to come. "Don't punish everyone else because of Hannah," he said. Against my better judgment, we went. Big mistake. Dinner started fine, but midway through the meal, Hannah raised her glass and said loudly, "I just want to say how thankful I am to be the bigger person in all of this." Everyone went silent. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. Adam muttered under his breath, "Here we go." Hannah continued, "Some people hold grudges, but I've chosen to rise above. I mean, yeah, maybe I had a little too much fun at the wedding, but isn't that what celebrations are for?" I slammed my fork down. "Fun? You made my wedding about you. You embarrassed me in front of Adam's entire family. Do you have any idea how humiliating that was?" She leaned forward, eyes glittering with fake innocence. "Or maybe you're just jealous people paid attention to me for once." The table erupted. My aunt tried to change the subject, my mom begged us to stop, and my dad rubbed his temples like he'd aged 10 years in 5 minutes. Adam took my hand under the table, but I could feel his frustration radiating through his grip. We left early, and in the car, Adam said, "I think you need to make a choice. Either you keep subjecting yourself to this circus, or you cut ties completely. But we can't keep doing this back and forth forever. I hated that he was right. Over the next few months, I pulled back even further. No family dinners, no phone calls, no texts. Hannah, of course, turned it into a performance. She posted vague things on Facebook like, "It's sad when family can't forgive you for being yourself, and some people just can't handle when others shine." She even posted an old picture of us together with the caption, "Miss my sister. Hope she remembers blood is thicker than water." People who didn't know the full story commented things like, "Reach out to her," and "Life's too short to stay mad." Every time I saw it, I wanted to scream. Then came the breaking point. Adam and I had finally settled in a married life when my mom called, frantic. "Your sister's in the hospital," she blurted. My stomach dropped. I asked what happened, and she explained Hannah had gotten into a car accident. Nothing life-threatening, but she'd broken her arm and had some bruised ribs. Of course, I went to see her. Whatever anger I had, I wasn't heartless. When I walked into the hospital room, though, Anna looked up at me with this smug little smile. "Knew you'd come," she said softly, like she just went to bed. I sat down, trying to keep my cool. "How are you feeling?" "Oh, I'll survive," she said dramatically, wincing as she shifted in bed. But it made me realize how fragile life is. We shouldn't waste time fighting. For a brief second, I thought maybe, just maybe, this was the turning point. That she'd finally grown up, or at least gained perspective. But then she added, "So, how about you throw me a party when I get out? You know, something to celebrate life. Since I didn't get the chance at your wedding." I swear, I almost laughed out loud. She was in a hospital bed, hooked up to an 4, and she was still angling for attention. That was it for me. I stood up, looked her dead in the eye, and said, "You're never going to change, are you?" She blinked, genuinely confused. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I'm done. I can't keep doing this with you. I hope you heal. I hope you figure your life out, but I'm not going to be part of this game anymore." Her mouth fell open, but I walked out before she could respond. That was 6 months ago. Since then, I've stuck to my decision. Adam and I have focused on building our own little bubble of peace. My relationship with my parents is strained. They keep begging me to reconcile, but honestly, for the first time in my life, I feel free. Because here's the thing. Family is supposed to lift you up, not drag you down. And sometimes, the hardest but healthiest choice is walking away. So, if you're reading this wondering whether it makes you an asshole to distance yourself from toxic family, it doesn't. It makes you sane. And if you've stuck with me through this whole messy ride, do me a favor, hit like and subscribe. It helps more than you know, and it'll keep you around for the next wild story I've got lined up. My dad decided to rewrite his will, and suddenly the entire family turned into vultures. That's how it started. At least, that's how it felt from where I was standing. I never thought I'd see my family, people I grew up loving, people I trusted, transform so quickly the moment money was involved. To back up a bit, I'm Emily, 29 years old, the middle child in a family of 3. My older brother, Josh, is 34, and my younger sister, Rachel, is 25. Our parents worked hard all their lives. My dad is a contractor and my mom is a school teacher. We weren't rich growing up, but we were comfortable. Dad was always proud of the house he built with his own hands. As we got older, I guess I assumed that when they eventually passed, whatever they had would be split evenly. I mean, isn't that how it usually goes? But apparently, I was naive. About a year ago, Dad got sick. Nothing terminal at the time, just health scares, high blood pressure, some complications from an old back injury, things like that. It was enough to make him start thinking about the future. One night, he called the 3 of us over and said he'd begun rewriting his will. I remember the room going dead silent. Mom sat next to him, squeezing his hand like she hated hearing him talk about death, but he just cleared his throat and said, "I need to make sure everything is settled while I still can." At first, I thought this was just him being overly cautious. But then he started talking about the house. And that's where everything went sideways. "I've decided I'm going to leave the house to one of you," he said. "Not split 3 ways. It doesn't make sense to divide it. One of you will inherit it." That's when Rachel blurted, "It should be me. I'm the youngest. And I'm the one still living nearby." Josh scoffed. "Please, I'm the oldest. I put in the most years helping Dad out with the place. Half the repairs over the last decade were me. I sat there stunned. Wait, you guys are just claiming it already? He literally just said he's writing the will. Shouldn't this be his decision? But they ignored me, diving headfirst into an argument that grew louder and uglier with every passing minute. Dad eventually had to raise his voice, which he almost never did, to get them to stop. He told us all he hadn't decided yet, and that it wasn't something to fight about like children. But it was too late. The seed was planted. After that night, things shifted in ways I couldn't have predicted. Rachel started showing up at my parents' house constantly, bringing groceries, cleaning, fussing over Dad like she was auditioning for favorite child of the year. Josh, meanwhile, bragged about every little repair he did, fixing a leaky faucet, mowing the lawn, and made sure everyone knew how essential he was to keeping the house in good shape. And me? I didn't change anything. I visited like I always did, helped when I could, and tried not to get caught up in the competition. But somehow, that made me look like the outsider. One afternoon, I came over to drop off dinner and found Rachel already there. She looked me up and down and said, "Wow, look who finally decided to show up. You better step it up if you don't want to get left out." Ich blinkte her. "What are you talking about?" She smirked. "Dad hasn't made his final decision yet. You really think he's going to give the house to someone who barely comes around?" I wanted to slap that smug look right off her face, but instead I just walked past her and gave the food to Mom. Josh wasn't much better. He called me one night out of the blue and said, "Look, Dad's going to leave the house to me. It just makes sense. You and Rachel should stop stressing about it." I sighed. "I'm not stressing about it. You're the one bringing it up." "Well, you should be relieved. You don't even like this town. You'd probably sell it anyway." That stung more than I wanted to admit, because he wasn't entirely wrong. I had always dreamed of moving somewhere bigger, somewhere with more opportunities. But that didn't mean I didn't care about the house. It wasn't about the property. It was about what it represented. Our childhood, our family, our memories. Then, a few months later, things got even uglier. Dad had a mild heart attack. He survived, thank God, but it scared all of us. Suddenly, the will wasn't just an abstract future thing. It was real, pressing, immediate. While Dad was recovering in the hospital, Rachel took it upon herself to start making suggestions to him about the will. I overheard her one night telling him, "Don't you think it makes the most sense for me to get the house? I'll take care of it. I'll keep it in the family. Emily will just leave, and Josh doesn't even need it with the money he makes." I step into the room, furious. "Are you kidding me right now? He's literally lying in a hospital bed, and you're lobbying for the house." Rachel's face turned red. "I'm just being realistic." Dad groaned and told us both to stop, but the damage was done. For the first time in my life, I felt like my siblings weren't my siblings anymore. They were competitors. When Dad came home, he announced that he'd made his decision but wasn't going to tell us yet. "It's in writing," he said firmly. "No more discussions. This is settled." But of course, that didn't stop the drama. Rachel started dropping hints like, "Well, when I have the house," or "I'll make sure to host Thanksgiving here like Mom used to." Josh wasn't much better. He kept telling his kids things like, "One day, Grandpa's house will be yours." Meanwhile, I stayed silent, but the resentment was eating me alive. Then came the day everything exploded. We were all at the house for a family dinner, and Dad left the room for a moment. Josh leaned over and whispered, "It's between me and Rachel, You're not even in the running." I glared at him. "Why do you care so much? It's not about the house. It's about Dad's choice." Rachel snorted. "Oh, please. Don't act like you're above this. We all know you'd take in a heartbeat if he offered." That's when I snapped. "You two are tearing this family apart over bricks and wood. Do you even hear yourselves? He's still alive, for God's sake, and you're acting like vultures circling a body." The room went silent. Mom looked horrified. Dad walked back in, sensing the tension, but no one said anything. Dinner ended awkwardly, and we all left in separate cars. That night, I cried harder than I had in years, because deep down, I knew I wasn't just mad at them. I was scared. Scared that when Dad was gone, the house wouldn't be the only thing lost. We'd lose each other too, and part of me wondered if that loss had already started. When the truth about the adoption finally broke out, the house didn't just feel tense, it felt like a battlefield. Every corner carried the weight of unspoken accusations, silent tears, and muffled rage. My dad sat on the recliner like a king dethroned, clutching the TV remote but not even turning it on. Mom stayed in the kitchen, wiping down the counter so many times I thought she'd scrub the surface raw. And I felt like a stranger in my own home. I wanted to scream. I wanted to demand why no one had the decency to tell me something so monumental about my life. But more than that, I wanted someone to fight for me. Someone to step up and say, hey, no matter how this looks, you belong here. But that didn't happen. Instead, Dad broke the silence. So what now? He muttered, his voice low, almost defeated. What now? Mom shot back, her voice sharp like shattered glass. You're the one who kept pushing this lie. You wanted us to just pretend like nothing happened. That's not how families work, John. I sat in the middle, my chest pounding. The words families work felt like a cruel joke. If families work, why did mine feel like it was crumbling at the seams? I stood up suddenly, my chair screeching across the hardwood floor. You know what's worse than finding out I'm adopted? It's realizing my entire life has been built on secrets and lies. How am I supposed to trust anything you guys say now? Mom's face softened. For the first time in days, she looked less like someone hiding behind walls and more like a mother afraid of losing her child. Sweetheart, please. Don't. I cut her off. Don't call me sweetheart, like you didn't know this was going to blow my whole world apart. Dad sighed, pressing his fingers against his temples. You're blowing this out of proportion. I turned to him, anger flashing hot through my veins. Out of proportion? Finding out the people I thought were my parents have been lying to me for 18 years isn't out of proportion. It's betrayal. The word hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. Dad didn't reply. Mom sank into a chair, her eyes wet but determined. Maybe it's time you knew everything. The whole story, not just the part that makes your father look like the bad guy. That caught my attention. I folded my arms, glaring but curious. Fine, tell me. She took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly as she reached for a glass of water she didn't drink. You weren't just adopted. You were chosen. We had been trying for years, and the doctors told us it wasn't going to happen naturally. I was devastated. And then one night, your father's cousin came to us. She told us there was this girl, barely 18, terrified and pregnant, who wanted her baby to have a better life. She didn't want the baby to end up in foster care. She wanted us. I blinked. Wait, you're saying my biological mom was someone you knew? Dad grunted, but didn't deny it. Mom nodded. She's not a stranger. She's family. Or she was. My stomach dropped. Ooh, silence. The kind that makes your skin crawl. Finally, Dad muttered, your aunt. The room spun. What? Mom quickly added. Not the aunt you grew up with. Not the one you know. She was my cousin, technically your second aunt. But she couldn't raise you. She begged us to. And we did. Because we loved you. From day one. I staggered back, gripping the edge of the table. So, you're telling me my biological mom is part of this family? And you kept that from me all this time? Dad snapped, his patience shattering. Because she didn't want you to know, she made us promise. Do you think this was easy for us? We sacrificed everything to raise you like our own. And now you're throwing it back in our faces? I'm not throwing anything. I shot back, my throat tight. I just want the truth. I deserve to know where I came from. Mom reached for me, but I pulled away. Her hand dropped, defeated. The rest of the night blurred into more arguing, more tears, and more silence that followed every shouted word. I lay in my bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything. The betrayal, the lies, the revelation that my biological mom wasn't some faceless stranger, but a woman connected to me in ways I couldn't even process. Sleep never came. Instead, questions did. Would I ever meet her? Would she even want to meet me? Did she think about me all these years? And most importantly, could I ever forgive the people who raised me for hiding this from me? The next morning, the house was eerily quiet. No clatter em dishes, no murmúrio de argumes, no TV blaring. Just silence. I walked downstairs to find my dad gone. his car missing from the driveway. Mom sat at the kitchen table with a folder in front of her. When she saw me, her eyes softened, though her face looked drained. "This is her," she whispered, sliding the folder toward me. "Your biological mother. Her name, her picture, everything. If you want to know her, this is how." My hand shook as I opened it. A photo slipped out, a younger version of a woman I didn't recognize, but who looked unsettlingly familiar. Same eyes, same faint dimple in the chin. My heart skipped. That was her. And for the first time, I realized my story wasn't just about betrayal and lies. It was about the choices people make, the secrets they keep, and the messy, painful love that binds, or breaks, a family. But deep down, I knew one thing. No matter how much it hurt, I needed to find her. Because maybe the only way to heal was to confront the person who started it all. And that was just the beginning. If you felt this story pull you in, don't forget to hit like and subscribe, because the next chapter will take the family drama to a whole new level, and you won't want to miss it. The day my cousin's wedding invitation arrived, I thought it was just another piece of mail. White envelope, gold lettering, cursive script that made it look fancier than it really was. But the second I opened it, my chest tightened. Not because of the event itself, but because of who would be there. You see, my family doesn't do small drama. We do explosions. Nuclear ones. The kind of arguments that leave people not speaking for years. The last time we'd all been under the same roof was 5 years ago at my grandmother's funeral, and that ended with someone throwing a wine glass across the room and another storming out swearing they'd never come back. Now, they wanted us to sit through a wedding ceremony together, smiling like we were one big happy family. I could already feel the tension simmering in my chest. My mom was buzzing with excitement, though. "Oh, it's going to be beautiful," she said, holding the invitation up like it was a winning lottery ticket. "Your cousin Jessica always had such good taste. This is going to be elegant, classy, exactly what this family needs right now." "Classy," I muttered under my breath. "You're inviting Dad's side, too, right? The ones who called each other snakes at Grandma's funeral." She gave me that look, the one that said, "Don't test me." "Everyone's invited," she said flatly. "We're family. We need to learn how to act like it again." I wanted to laugh, but the idea of sitting through a family event with Uncle Ron, who still hadn't paid back the money he borrowed from my dad, or Aunt Linda, who loved gossiping about everyone's failures, didn't exactly scream family healing to me. Still, I couldn't argue. Jessica deserved her day. She was the one cousin who'd always stayed out of the drama, the peacekeeper who tried to keep everyone together even when the rest of us wanted to tear each other apart. But as the weeks ticked down, it became clear this wasn't going to be just a wedding. It was going to be a stage, a place for old grudges to resurface, for whispered secrets to finally burst into the open, and for years of resentment to boil over in front of everyone. The first crack showed up at the rehearsal dinner. We were all seated at this long table, candles flickering, everyone trying way too hard to act civil. Jessica sat at the center with her fiancé, grinning nervously. To her left was Aunt Linda, already 2 glasses of wine deep. To her right was Uncle Ron, tapping his fork against the plate like a ticking time bomb. And then it started. "So," Aunt Linda said, swirling her glass, "Ron, did you ever pay John back that money? Or is that just another thing you conveniently forgot?" The table went dead silent. Jessica's fiancé glanced around, confused, like he'd just walked into a play halfway through. Ron froze, his face turning red. "That's none of your damn business." "Oh, but it is," Linda shot back, her voice dripping with venom. "Because every time I see my brother," she gestured toward my dad, "he's still fuming about it. Maybe if you weren't such a leech." Ron slammed his fist on the table, silverware clattering. "Say one more word, Linda, and I swear." Jessica stood up, her voice cracking. "Can you not? This is supposed to be about me and Michael, not your old fights. For once in your lives, can you just shut up and be happy for me?" The silence that followed was suffocating. But me? I knew this was just the beginning. The wedding hadn't even happened yet, and already the skeletons were clawing their way out of the closet. And the worst part? I had my own secret, one that would blow this family drama wide open if it ever slipped out. Because while everyone was busy pointing fingers at each other, I was hiding something that connected me to the bride in a way no one else knew. And if it came out, the entire wedding and maybe the entire family would fall apart. The morning of the wedding felt heavy. Not because of the weather, though the sky was overcast in that gray, muted way that makes everything feel suspended in time, but because I knew what was hanging over me. My secret. My stupid, dangerous, reckless secret. The one that tied me to Jessica. To everyone else, Jessica was my cousin, my big sister growing up. The one who'd braid my hair, sneak me candy when my mom wasn't looking, cover for me when I was late sneaking home. To me, she wasn't just family. She was the glue that held my entire world together. But she and I had crossed a line. Months before she got engaged, Jessica had confessed something to me. Not about Michael, not about her career, not about her wedding. Something far more intimate. She told me about the affair. At first, I thought she was joking. Jessica, the perfect one? The one who always played peacekeeper, who everyone admired. But no, she told me everything. The late nights sneaking out, the text that she deleted before Michael could see, the guilt she carried every time she kissed him knowing she had kissed someone else the night before. And worse than all of that, she told me who it was. It wasn't some stranger. It wasn't a fling she could explain away. It was Daniel, my brother. That's what had been eating at me since the day she told me. Daniel had always been a screw-up. He gambled, he drank, he chased women like it was a sport. But Jessica, she was supposed to be untouchable. And yet, she told me herself, they'd been together for months before she met Michael. And even after she got engaged, she couldn't cut Daniel off. You don't understand, she whispered one night when we were sitting in her car, parked behind the church where we used to sneak sodas from the vending machine. Her eyes were red, her hands gripping the wheel. I know it's wrong. I know it. But with Daniel, it's different. It's like I can breathe, like he sees the real me. I wanted to scream at her, shake her, tell her she was destroying everything. But instead, I sat there frozen because what was I supposed to do? Rat out my brother? Destroy my cousin's wedding? Break Michael's heart? So, I did the cowardly thing. I kept her secret, and now, on the day of her wedding, it was clawing its way out of me like a monster I couldn't hold back. The ceremony started peacefully enough. Jessica looked beautiful, radiant in her gown, her smile wide but shaky. Michael looked at her like she was the only thing keeping him alive. For a while, I let myself believe maybe this could work. Maybe she could bury the past and actually commit to Michael. But then I saw Daniel, sitting 3 rows back, his tie crooked, his smirk plastered across his face like he was in on a joke no one else knew. And when Jessica's eyes flickered toward him, just for a second, just long enough, I knew the joke wasn't just his. It was theirs. The vows were spoken. The rings exchanged. Everyone clapped. Everyone smiled. Everyone pretended. But the reception? That's where it all broke. The ballroom was dripping with chandeliers and roses, tables lined with champagne glasses. Music played, people danced, laughter floated in the air. For a brief moment, I almost forgot the storm brewing under the surface. Then Linda started drinking again. She cornered my dad at the bar, raising her voice loud enough for the entire room to hear. You really think Ron's the only thief in this family? Please, half of you have secrets. My stomach dropped, because I knew where this was going. Linda didn't know specifics, but Linda always sensed blood. And once she scented it, she dug until she exposed something. Jessica's face paled. She gripped Michael's hand tighter. Daniel disappeared from his table. My pulse raced. And then it happened. Do you know what I saw? Linda said, swaying as she pointed across the room. I saw your precious bride sneaking around months before she said yes to Michael. With him, her finger jabbed toward Daniel. The room went still. Jessica froze, her lips trembling. Michael's face contorted, confusion giving way to rage. Daniel stepped forward, that same damn smirk on his face, like he'd been waiting for this moment. You're drunk, Linda, Jessica stammered, her voice thin. You don't know what you're talking about. But Linda only laughed. Don't I? Don't I, Jessica? Or maybe you'd like to tell Michael yourself. Michael's hand slipped from hers. He looked at her, then at Daniel, then back at her again. His jaw clenched. Tell me it's not true, he whispered. Jessica opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Tears slid down her cheeks. And just like that, the dam burst. Michael shoved his chair back, the legs screeching against the floor. "You've been sleeping with him? My brother-in-law? My cousin?" His voice cracked, raw and broken. "How long, Jessica? How long have you been making a fool out of me?" Daniel chuckled. "Relax, Mike. It's not like you ever really had her." Michael lunged. The two of them crashed into a table, glasses shattering, people screaming. The band stopped playing, someone yelled for security, and Jessica was sobbing, begging them to stop. And me? I stood there frozen, knowing this was partly my fault. I'd known for months. I could have stopped this, but I hadn't. And now the entire wedding was collapsing in flames. The fight ended with Michael storming out, his suit torn, his face red. Jessica tried to follow, but he pushed her away, shouting, "We're done. Don't you dare follow me." Daniel shrugged, fixing his tie like nothing had happened. And Jessica crumbled to the floor, her white gown pooling around her like ashes. The family that was supposed to heal that day had been shattered beyond repair. And the worst part? It wasn't even over yet. Because secrets like these don't just destroy weddings. They destroy generations. If you want to drop the next family drama, make sure you hit like and subscribe so you never miss what comes next. People talk about family loyalty like it's this sacred thing, like blood automatically means trust. I used to believe that too, until the night my cousin stole everything from me. My house, my peace of mind, and nearly my marriage. But let me back up, because if I just jump to the betrayal, you'll think I'm exaggerating. You'll think no family could possibly do something so cold. Growing up, my cousin Rachel was like my shadow. We were born 6 months apart, and our mothers were sisters, so we basically grew up in each other's pockets. Summers at my grandma's house, we shared bunk beds, whispered secrets into the dark, and made promises we thought would last forever. She was the wild one. Everyone knew it. She got caught shoplifting makeup at 14, sneaking out with older boys at 16, and getting drunk behind the bowling alley before prom. But somehow, people always forgave her. That's just Rachel being Rachel. They'd laugh like she was some sitcom character instead of ticking time bomb. Meanwhile, I was the responsible one. The one who went to college, got a steady job, married my high school sweetheart Mark, and bought a modest little house on the edge of town. Rachel floated from boyfriend to boyfriend, job to job, couch to couch. Whenever she crashed, she called me. And I always answered. Always. So when she called crying one night, saying her latest boyfriend had kicked her out and she had nowhere else to go, I didn't hesitate. I told her she could stay with us for a few weeks until she figured things out. Mark wasn't thrilled, but he didn't say no. He's always been kind, the type of man who mows the neighbor's lawn without being asked. Still, I could see the tightness in his jaw when I told him Rachel was moving in. She's family, I reminded him. It's temporary. Famous last words. At first, it wasn't terrible. Rachel helped with dishes, made jokes at dinner, and even offered to babysit our son Caleb when Mark and I needed a date night. It almost felt like old times, the three of us laughing in the living room. But then little things started to happen, like the way Rachel would forget to wear a bra around the house, lounging on the couch in Mark's oversized t-shirts, or the way she'd sit a little too close to him during movie nights, laughing too loud at his jokes. I brushed it off. I told myself I was imagining things, that jealousy was making me paranoid. After all, this was Rachel, my cousin, my sister in all but blood. Then came the first real crack. One evening, I came home from work early. Mark was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables, and Rachel was leaning against the counter, her hand brushing his arm as she laughed at something he said. When they noticed me, Rachel pulled back like she'd been caught stealing, and Mark gave me a look I couldn't read. "Hey," I said, forcing a smile. "What's going on?" "Nothing," Mark said too quickly. "Just talking." But I saw the way Rachel's cheeks flushed. That night, I confronted her in the guest room. "Rachel, what are you doing?" I asked, keeping my voice low so Caleb wouldn't hear. She blinked innocently. "What do you mean?" "You know what I mean. The way you act around Mark." Her lips curled into a smirk I'd never seen before. "Relax, cuz. He's cute, but he's yours." I wouldn't, but something in her tone made my stomach twist. The weeks that followed only got worse. Rachel started staying out late, coming home drunk, and stumbling through the door at 3 a.m. Sometimes Mark would still be awake, and I'd hear them talking in the kitchen while I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, fury boiling in my chest. Then came the night that blew everything up. I had taken Caleb to my mom's for the weekend because she missed seeing him, and I thought Mark could use a break from the chaos. I told myself it would be good for everyone. Mark would relax, Rachel could figure herself out, and I'd get some quiet time. When I came home Sunday afternoon, the house was too quiet, too still. I walked upstairs to our bedroom, pushed the door open, and froze. There they were, Rachel and Mark, in my bed. For a moment, the world tilted. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My heart slammed against my ribs, so hard it hurt. Rachel's eyes went wide. She scrambled for the sheets, covering herself with a laugh that wasn't funny at all. Oh my God, it's not what it looks like. But it was exactly what it looked like. Mark sat up, his face pale, his mouth opening and closing like he wanted to explain, but there was no explanation that could erase the image burned into my brain. I turned and walked out before either of them could speak. Down the stairs, out the door, into my car. I didn't even know where I was driving. My hands shook on the wheel, tears blinding me. All I knew was that my cousin, the girl I grew up with, trusted, defended, had just betrayed me in the worst way imaginable. And my husband had let her. The worst part? That was only the beginning. Because what happened after that day made me realize betrayal doesn't just come in one blow. It seeps in, infects everything, until there's nothing left to salvage. I didn't go home that night. I drove aimlessly until I found myself parked outside a diner on the edge of town, the neon sign flickering in the foggy night air. I sat there for hours, staring at my reflection in the windshield, asking myself the same question over and over. How could they do this to me? Rachel, my cousin, my sister, my supposed best friend, and Mark, the man I built my life with. Together. In my bed. When the sun finally came up, I was still in the car. My phone buzzed with missed calls, text from Mark. Please come home. Please let me explain. It's not what you think. Except it was exactly what I thought. I went to my mom's instead. When she saw me standing there with red eyes and shaking hands, she didn't ask questions. She just pulled me into a hug and whispered, "Stay here as long as you need." For 2 days, I didn't answer Mark's calls. Didn't respond to Rachel's frantic texts. I messed up. I'm sorry. Please don't hate me. You don't understand. It just happened. It just happened. Like tripping over a crack in the sidewalk. Like spilling coffee on your shirt. Not like crawling into someone else's marriage bed. By the 3rd day, Mark showed up at my mom's. He stood on the porch, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him, his hair messy, his eyes bloodshot. "Please," he begged when I cracked the door open. "Just hear me out." I wanted to slam in his face, but my mom put her hand on my shoulder. "Let him talk," she said softly. So I let him. He started with excuses. He was drunk. He was lonely. He felt disconnected from me, like I'd been shutting him out. That's not an excuse. I snapped, my voice shaking. "You had a choice, Mark. You always had a choice." He nodded, tears spilling down his face. I know I screwed up, but it wasn't about Rachel. It wasn't about her at all. It was about me being weak, being selfish. I regret it every second. Please, don't throw us away over one mistake. One mistake. If he had cheated with a stranger, maybe I could have considered forgiving him. Maybe. But with Rachel, that wasn't a mistake. That was a choice that cut so deep it poisoned everything. I told him to leave. He begged until my mom stepped in, her voice firm. She said leave. The next person to show up was Rachel. She stormed into my mom's kitchen like she owned the place, her mascara smeared, her hands flailing. "Why are you acting like I'm the villain here?" she demanded. "Do you know how hard it's been for me? Do you know what it's like to be alone while you have this perfect little life?" He wanted me. For once, someone actually wanted me. I stared at her, stunned. "Are you listening to yourself? You destroyed my family because you were lonely?" Her lips trembled. "I didn't mean for it to happen, but you've always had everything. Mark, Caleb, stability. And I had nothing. I wanted to feel loved. I wanted to hit her. I wanted to shake her until she understood the gravity of what she'd done. Instead, I told her to get out before I called the cops. For a while, things were a blur. I filed for separation. Mark moved in with his brother. Rachel disappeared, probably shacked up with another guy who had no idea what kind of tornado he'd let into his life. But it wasn't over, because family drama never ends cleanly. Word spread fast. My aunt, the one who always babied Rachel, called me screaming, saying I was cruel for kicking her daughter out on the street. She had the audacity to say I broke the family apart. Thanksgiving came, and the tension was so thick it was suffocating. Half the family sat on my side of the table, glaring at Rachel and her mom. The other half whispered that I should forgive her, that family is family. And Mark? He showed up too, sitting at the end of the table like a ghost, refusing to eat, his eyes fixed on me. After dinner, he pulled me aside. "I'll wait," he said quietly. "No matter how long it takes. I'll prove to you that I can be better. I'll prove that I'll never hurt you again." But could he? Every time I looked at him, I saw Rachel smirk. I heard her laugh. I felt the knife twisting in my back. I don't know if forgiveness is even possible in situations like this. What I do know is that betrayal changes you. It cracks something inside you that never quite heals. And maybe that's the real family curse. Not money troubles, not old grudges, but the way we betray the people closest to us and still expect them to sit across the table and smile. If you want more of these deep family stories, hit like and subscribe. It's what keeps me motivated to share the next one with you. The fight started over something stupid, leftover lasagna. You'd think a family like ours, with all the history and tension packed into one cramped house, would have exploded over something big, like money or betrayal. But no, it was lasagna, shoved into a plastic container in the fridge that lit the match. Who ate the last piece? My younger sister, Megan, yelled from the kitchen, her voice echoing through the hall. I was sitting on the couch, scrolling through my phone, trying to ignore her. But of course, she stormed in, waving the empty container like it was Exhibit A in a murder trial. "You ate it, didn't you?" she accused. I raised an eyebrow. "You really think I'd risk my life over Mom's lasagna when Dad's been guarding it like national treasure?" She scoffed. "Don't play dumb. You've been sneaking food since you moved back in. You think no one notices, but we do." And there was the real problem. Not lasagna. Me. When I moved back home after my divorce, the tension in the house skyrocketed. My parents had mixed feelings about it. Dad was silently disappointed, Mom was cautiously supportive, and Megan had always resented me. I was the golden child, the one who left, got married, bought a house. And when it all crumbled, I came crawling back. Now, she had me right where she wanted me, at rock bottom, sharing a bathroom with her again. "You're paranoid," I said, getting up. "If it means that much to you, I'll buy you another lasagna." But she wasn't letting it go. "You waltz back in here like you own the place," she snapped. Like nothing ever happened. Meanwhile, I'm the one who stayed, who helped Mom and Dad when they needed it. But does anyone give me credit? No. It's always you. Her words cut deeper than I wanted to admit, because part of me wondered if she was right. Before I could respond, Mom walked in, carrying a basket of laundry. She froze when she saw us, squared off. "What's going on?" Megan shoved the container in her face. "She ate it." Mom sighed. "It's just lasagna." "No, it's not." Megan exploded. "It's about her always getting away with everything. She screws up her life, and we all have to deal with the fallout. And what happens? She gets sympathy. I get stuck here. Always." The room went silent. Mom looked at me, her eyes full of worry, then back at Megan, her lips tightening. "Enough. This isn't about food. It's about jealousy. And I'm tired of watching you two tear each other apart." But Megan wasn't done. She turned to me, her voice trembling with rage. "You think you're better than me, don't you? That's why you left. That's why you look down on me for staying. But guess what? At least I didn't marry a guy who cheated on me with his secretary." Her words hit me like a slap. My throat tightened, my vision blurred. Mom gasped. "Megan." But Megan didn't look sorry. She looked victorious. I ran upstairs before they could see me cry. That night, I lay in my old childhood bedroom, staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars still stuck to the ceiling, wondering how everything had fallen apart so fast. My marriage, my independence, my dignity, it all seemed like distant memories. And now I was back in the house. I thought I'd escaped, being dragged into the same old family drama. But here's the thing about living under the same roof with people who know your deepest wounds. The fights never stay small. The lasagna fight was just the opening act, because the very next day, Megan dropped a bomb that would drag every skeleton out of our family closet and make me question everything I thought I knew about the people I was forced to live with. The morning after the lasagna fight, the air in the house was thick, like a storm was circling just outside the windows. Mom clattered around in the kitchen, trying to pretend things were normal, but the silence between me and Megan was heavy, hostile, electric. I tried avoiding her, drinking my coffee and keeping my eyes on the newspaper, but Megan wasn't about to let it go. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed, that same smug look plastered on her face. "Are we really just going to sit here and act like nothing happened last night?" she asked. Mom set down the spatula a little too hard. "Megan, not now." "No, Mom, Megan insisti. She needs to hear this. Everyone does." Dad shuffled in, still in his robe, rubbing his temples like he already regretted waking up. "Hear what?" Megan's eyes flicked toward me, and then she said it, calm, deliberate, venom dripping from every word. Maybe she wouldn't think she's so perfect if she knew the truth about Dad. The room froze. Dad's head snapped up. Mom dropped the spatula completely. My heart pounded in my chest. "What are you talking about?" I asked, my voice shaking. Megan leaned against the doorframe like she'd been waiting for this moment her whole life. "Oh, you didn't know?" "Figures. Because everyone always protects you. But it's time someone told you that Dad isn't the saint you think he is." Dad's face turned pale, and that was the first sign that she wasn't bluffing. "Shut your mouth," Dad growled, his voice low, dangerous. But Megan only smiled. "Why? Afraid of the truth coming out? Afraid your little princess will see who you really are?" "Enough," Mom snapped, but her voice cracked in a way that made my stomach twist. I looked between them. Dad looking furious, Mom looking terrified, and Megan looking satisfied. And something inside me broke. "What truth?" I demanded. No one answered. The silence was worse than yelling. Finally, Megan tilted her head and said, "Ask him about Linda." My heart dropped. Dad's jaw clenched, and Mom looked down at the floor. That was all the confirmation I needed. "Who's Linda?" I whispered, though I already knew. Dad ran a hand over his face. "It was years ago, before you left, before everything. It didn't mean anything." The world tilted. My stomach churned. My father, who I'd always thought of as this steady, reliable man, had cheated. Just like my ex-husband. The betrayal cut twice as deep because this time it wasn't just about me. It was about everything I thought I knew about my family. Megan folded her arms. "So, tell me again how I'm the bitter one? At least I never lied to anyone about who I am." I couldn't speak. I couldn't even breathe properly. I stood up, my chair scraping across the floor. "How long?" Dad looked at me, his eyes heavy with shame. "It was one time. A mistake. Your mother and I worked through it." I turned to Mom, who still hadn't looked me in the eye. "You knew." Tears welled in her eyes. "Yes, but we decided to move past it for the family's sake." I staggered back, gripping the counter for support. "For the family's sake? Or because you didn't want anyone to find out?" Megan smirked. "See? Welcome to the real world, sis. Nobody's perfect here. You just thought you were living in some fantasy family. Guess what? We're all screwed up." Her words burned, but what hurt more was seeing my parents standing there, exposed and fragile, not the pillars of stability I'd always imagined. I left the kitchen before I exploded. Upstairs, I sat on my bed, shaking, my mind replaying every moment of my childhood. The way Dad worked late. The way Mom would cry, quietly sometimes when she thought no one noticed. The fights I chalked up to stress. It all made sense now. And suddenly, my divorce, my failure, felt like part of some cursed pattern. Like infidelity and disappointment were stitched into the very fabric of my family. That night, Megan came to my room. For once, she wasn't smirking. "I didn't do it to hurt you," she said softly. I laughed bitterly. "Really? Because it sure felt like it." She sighed. "I did it because you deserve to know the truth. You've been walking around like you're the only one whose life fell apart. when the reality is this family's been broken for years. You just didn't see it. You still there. For once, she looked more like a sister than an enemy. Tired, bitter, but honest. You could have told me differently, I said. Maybe, she admitted. But would you have listened? She had a point. The next few days were chaos. Dad tried to defend himself. Mom tried to keep the peace, and Megan kept pushing for honesty about everything. And in the middle of it all, I felt like I was unraveling. But as messed up as it was, I realized something. For the first time in years, we weren't pretending anymore. The ugly truth was out, and maybe, just maybe, that meant we could start being real with each other. I didn't forgive Dad right away. I still haven't. But I did something I hadn't done in years. I sat with Megan in the kitchen late at night, eating ice cream straight from the carton, and we actually talked. She wasn't wrong. We'd both been carrying resentment. Her for feeling overlooked, me for feeling abandoned. And maybe, just maybe, the lasagna fight wasn't about food at all. It was about finally saying everything we'd been holding back. And as much as it hurt, I knew one thing. Sometimes, the only way to rebuild a family is to let it burn first. If you're still here listening, it means you love a good, messy family story. Stick around for more, and make sure to hit like and subscribe. You won't want to miss the next twist. The day I walked back into my parents' house, I was hit with the smell of cinnamon rolls. Not the comforting, homemade kind either. The frozen, pre-packaged ones Mom always bought when she wanted the house to feel warm for company. That smell was her way of masking tension, and I should have recognized it right away. Because under the sweet scent, there was a storm brewing. I'd only come home because Mom begged me. She called 3 times in 1 week, her voice trembling with that subtle guilt trip tone only mothers can master. We just need you here, honey. Things aren't right. So, I drove the 2 hours from my apartment back to the place I swore I'd never live in again. I thought maybe Dad had fallen sick, or maybe Megan, my older sister, had another one of her meltdowns. But when I stepped inside, I knew this wasn't about illness or tantrums. It was about secrets. The family dining table was already set, even though it was barely 4 in the afternoon. Plates polished, silverware gleaming, Mom's best tablecloth laid out like it was Christmas Eve. Except it wasn't Christmas, it was July. What's going on? I asked, setting my bag down. Mom appeared from the kitchen, her smile stretched too tight. Oh, nothing, sweetie. Just wanted to have dinner together. Like old times. I frowned. My family never did like old times unless something was about to implode. Then I heard footsteps, heavy ones, and there she was, Megan, my beautiful, bitter, impossible sister. She gave me that once-over look she always did, like she was inspecting me for flaws. Well, look who finally decided to show up. The prodigal daughter returns. I sighed. Nice to see you too. Dad came in from the living room, adjusting his glasses. He looked older than the last time I'd seen him. Tired, but his voice was firm. We're sitting down at 6. Everyone, no excuses. That's when I knew this wasn't a reunion. This was an ambush. By 6, we were seated, the 4 of us, like some perfect family out of catalog. Except nobody was touching their food. Mom's lasagna sat steaming in the middle, untouched, while tension filled the room like smoke. Finally, Dad cleared his throat. We need to talk about the house. I blinked. The house. Mom reached for her wine glass. Megan smirked like she'd been waiting for this. Dad folded his hands. We're selling it. The words hit me like a punch. That house wasn't just walls and a roof. It was every birthday, every fight, every scar of our family. It was the one constant when everything else fell apart. You can't, I said automatically. Megan leaned back, twirling her fork. Why not? It's falling apart, and frankly, we can't afford it anymore. Unless you're planning to pay the bills yourself, little sister. I shot her a glare. You would love that, wouldn't you? To erase everything just because you're bitter. Megan's smile sharpened. Better bitter than delusional. Enough, Dad barked, slamming his fist on the table. The dishes rattled. This is not about bitterness. It's about practicality. The mortgage, the taxes, we can't keep up. Your mother and I decided it's time to let go. But Mom wasn't nodding. She wasn't agreeing. She was staring into her glass like it held an escape route. Mom, I pressed. She jumped slightly, forcing a smile. It's for the best. It was a lie. I could feel it. I turned to Megan. You knew about this, didn't you? She shrugged. Of course I did. Unlike you, I actually stay involved in this family. Maybe if you called once in a while, you wouldn't always be the last to know. That stung, but before I could fire back, Dad dropped another bomb. And there's something else. When we sell the house, the money is going to Megan. The air left my lungs. What? Megan grinned, all teeth. Surprise. Dad's voice was steady, like he'd rehearsed this. She's been the one helping us financially. She deserves it. You made it clear you don't want to be part of this family anymore. I stared at him, my own father, like he was a stranger. That house is just as much mine as hers. You can't just. Actually, we can, Megan cut in sweetly. And we are. It felt like the floor was tilting beneath me. Everything, the cinnamon rolls, the fake smiles, the lasagna, it was all a setup. A performance to justify stabbing me in the back. I pushed away from the table. Unbelievable. Do you hear yourselves? You're rewriting history just so she gets everything. Dad's eyes hardened. History doesn't pay bills. Mom whispered, almost too quietly, please don't fight. But it was too late. The fight was here, clawing its way out of years of silence, secrets, and favoritism. And as Megan sat there, basking in her victory, I knew one thing for sure. This dinner wasn't about the house. It was about power, and they had just declared war. When I stormed out of the dining room that night, I thought leaving would cool me off. Instead, it only made the betrayal burn hotter. The July air outside was sticky, heavy, almost suffocating, and yet I still felt colder than I ever had in my life. My family wasn't just selling the house. They were selling me out. I paced the porch for what felt like hours before finally dragging myself back in. The house was quiet, lights dimmed, but I could hear voices drifting from the living room. Dad's voice, low and firm. Megan's, sharp and smug. Mom's barely a whisper. I didn't want to eavesdrop, but I couldn't stop myself. You did the right thing, Megan was saying. She left us. I stayed. She doesn't get to waltz in after years of absence and suddenly have a say. She's still our daughter, Mom said faintly. She doesn't act like it, Megan shot back. Who was the one helping with bills? Who's been there when you needed rides to doctor's appointments? Me, not her. Dad's voice cut in. Enough. We agreed. The decision is made. No more arguing. I stood frozen in the hallway, my fists clenched. So that was it. They were erasing me because I didn't fit Megan's version of loyalty. I barely slept that night. The couch in the guest room was stiff, and every creak of the house reminded me of how temporary everything suddenly felt. The next morning, I found Mom in the kitchen, staring blankly at her coffee. She didn't look at me when I walked in. Mom, I said carefully, you don't want this, do you? Her hands trembled as she lifted the mug. It's not about what I want. It should be, this is your home. She finally met my eyes, and for a second, I saw it. The fear. Your father thinks it's the only way. And Megan, she won't let it go. I swallowed hard. So you're just going to roll over and let her win? Please, she whispered, glancing toward the hallway. Don't make this harder. It was already hard. By the third day, the house felt like a battlefield. Megan strutted around like she already owned the place, snapping orders at Mom, bossing Dad about repairs that would make the sale smoother. And every time she looked at me, her smirk said the same thing. You lost. I couldn't take it anymore. That evening, when Dad went to bed and Megan left to meet her friends, I cornered Mom in the kitchen again. Why are you letting her control everything? I demanded. She's treating you like a puppet. She's helping, Mom insisted, though her voice wavered. You don't understand how much we need. No, I cut her off. You don't understand. She doesn't care about you. She cares about winning, about making sure I get nothing. Her eyes filled with tears, but she stayed silent. That silence broke me more than any insult Megan had thrown. So I did what I always swore I wouldn't. I dug into the past. I started in the attic, rifling through boxes of old papers, photographs, receipts, anything that could prove Megan wasn't the saint she pretended to be. And no, I found plenty. Unpaid credit card bills in Dad's name dated years back. A letter from a bank about a loan Megan had begged him to co-sign for, one she clearly hadn't paid off. Even a note in Mom's handwriting, "Don't tell her. She'll just use it against us." I carried the box downstairs like a soldier hauling ammunition. When Megan walked through the door later that night, smug from her outing, I dropped it on the coffee table with a thud. "What's this?" she asked, eyebrow raised. "Your real track record," I shot back. "You've been bleeding them dry for years, and now you're pretending to be the responsible one?" Her face paled just for a second before she sneered. "You went through my things? They're not your things. They're proof." I turned to Dad, who had just walked in behind her. "Did you know she still owes thousands from that loan you co-signed? Did you know she's been using your credit for years?" Dad froze. Mom looked like she might faint. "That's not true," Megan snapped quickly. "She's twisting everything." "Really?" I pulled out the bank letter and shoved it toward Dad. "Then explain this." The room went silent, except for the sound of paper trembling in Dad's hands. Mom whispered, "I told you, Megan. I told you this would come back to haunt us." Dad's face turned red, his jaw clenched. "Is this true?" Megan's lips tightened. "It's not what it looks like. It looks like you've been lying," I said, voice shaking with both rage and triumph. "And now you want to cash out the house to cover your mess." For once, Megan had no comeback. Dad set the letter down with shaking hands. "We'll talk about this in the morning. For now, go to your room." Her eyes flashed with fury, but she went. I stayed at the table with Mom and Dad, the weight of years finally spilling out in confessions. How Megan had manipulated them, how they felt trapped, how they let guilt steer their choices. And for the first time in years, I felt like maybe I wasn't the outsider anymore. But the war wasn't over. The next morning, Megan came down with bags packed. "If you're all going to turn against me, fine. I don't need this house. I'll figure out my own life." She slammed the door on her way out. Dad sighed heavily, collapsing into a chair. "Maybe this is for the best." Mom looked at me, her hand reaching for mine. "Thank you for not giving up on us." And in that moment, the house didn't feel like a battleground anymore. It felt like a truce. Fragile, yes, but real. And that's where the drama came full circle. If you enjoyed this story, hit like and subscribe. Your support keeps me going and helps me bring more stories your way. When you grow up in a family where every dinner feels like a competition instead of a meal, you start realizing early on that peace is something you'll never get for free. You gotta fight for it. And in my family, that fight usually had less to do with food and more to do with who could get the loudest, most dramatic reaction out of everyone else. My name's Tyler. I'm 27 now, but this whole mess started a couple of years back when I was still living at home with my parents, my younger sister Emily, and my older brother Jason. On the outside, we probably looked like a normal middle-class family. Nice suburban house, 2 cars in the driveway, a dog barking at the mailman every morning. But on the inside, our house was basically a stage for constant drama, most of it fueled by Jason. Jason has always been the golden child. He's the firstborn, the one my parents poured everything into: money, time, attention. He could do no wrong in their eyes, and that only got worse as we got older. He dropped out of college after 1 semester because school wasn't for him, bounced between jobs, and still managed to move back home every time his plans collapsed. And every single time, my parents welcomed him with open arms like he was some kind of war hero returning from battle. Meanwhile, Emily and I were treated like the supporting cast. Emily's only 20 now, but she's been grinding since high school, working part-time jobs, paying her own tuition, never asking my parents for a dime. Me, I got my degree, found a decent job, and tried to live quietly, but every time something went wrong with Jason, guess who was expected to step in and pick up the slack? Yep, me. The flashpoint for this story came on a Friday night, right before Thanksgiving. Jason had just come back home after getting fired again. He worked at some car dealership for about 3 months before personality clashes with his boss got him kicked out. Translation: he mouthed off one too many times and refused to follow rules. Anyway, that night, my mom announced at dinner that Jason would be taking some time to figure things out, and that we should all support him during this challenging transition. Emily nearly choked on her mashed potatoes. "Support him," she said, her eyes wide. "Mom, he's been in a transition since high school. When's he actually going to, do something with his life?" Jason, of course, rolled his eyes and leaned back like he was above it all. Hilax, Immunesia. Not everyone wants to work themselves to death for peanuts. I've got bigger plans than wasting my time at some crappy job. Bigger plans like what? I asked, already bracing for the nonsense that was about to come out of his mouth. I'm thinking about starting my own business, Jason said with a straight face. Something online, maybe a podcast, maybe a YouTube channel, something with passive income. I just need time and a little investment to get it off the ground. My dad perked up instantly. That's a great idea, son. You've always been so creative. What kind of investment are we talking about? I swear I almost laughed right there. Jason hadn't even thought it through, but he already had my dad in his corner. Emily slammed her fork down. Are you serious right now? You're actually going to give him more money to blow on some dumb scheme? Mom shushed her, giving her that sharp, don't disrespect your brother look. Jason smirked, knowing he had the upper hand. That was the moment I realized the cycle was about to repeat. Jason would get funding, he'd waste it, and then Emily and I would end up dealing with the fallout. So I decided right then and there that I wasn't just going to sit back quietly this time. Okay, I said slowly, looking around the table. If Jason's starting a business, then I think we should treat this like a real investment. That means he has to put together a plan. Expenses, potential revenue, timeline, the whole thing. If it's solid, then fine, maybe it's worth considering. But if he can't even write down what he's going to do, then it's a no. You would have thought I just suggested kicking Jason out into the street the way my mom reacted. Tyler, that's not fair. He's just starting out. He needs encouragement, not criticism. Emily, bless her, jumped right in. No, Tyler's right. If he wants to be taken seriously, then he should act like it. You don't just hand someone a blank check and hope it works out. That's insane. Jason, though, wasn't fazed at all. He leaned forward with that smug grin. Fine, you want a plan? I'll give you a plan. And when this takes off, don't expect a cut. That night, he stayed up late working on his laptop. The next morning, he handed my dad a printed packet with the words Jason Enterprises slapped on the cover in bold letters. Emily and I flipped through it, and I had to fight not to laugh out loud. It was basically 5 pages of vague nonsense about building a personal brand, monetizing influence, and leveraging digital platforms. No numbers, no specifics, no actual strategy. But my dad, he nodded along like Jason had just handed him the next Facebook business model. This looks very promising, he said. Emily groaned, so loud the dog barked. Dad, come on. This is garbage. He literally copied half of this off Google. Jason shot her a glare. Haters gonna hate. At least I'm trying to do something different. That's when things started spiraling. My dad announced that he was going to loan Jason $5,000 to kickstart his vision. $5,000. Money that, by the way, my parents always claimed they didn't have whenever Emily or I needed help with something. Emily lost it. She started yelling, pointing out every single time Jason had screwed up and gotten bailed out. My mom started crying, Jason started yelling back, and my dad was shouting over everyone, insisting that we believe in family. I sat there in silence, watching the chaos unfold, until Emily turned to me and shouted, Say something, Tyler. You know, this is insane. And she was right. I couldn't stay quiet anymore. I stood up, slammed my hands on the table, and said, If you give him that money, don't expect me to be around to clean up the mess when it blows up in his face. Because it will. And I'm done being the one who has to fix everything after he fails. The whole table went dead silent. My dad's face went red, Jason's smirk vanished, and Emily looked at me like I'd just dropped the biggest bomb of the night. But I meant every single word. And that was just the beginning of how this drama unfolded. The silence after my outburst stretched so long you could hear the old clock ticking in the living room. My dad's jaw was clenched, his fists resting on the table. Jason shifted uncomfortably, no longer looking as smug. My mom looked like she was about to cry again, and Emily was staring at me with this mix of relief and awe, like she finally had backup. My dad broke the silence first. Tyler, he said, his voice low but tight, don't you ever threaten to walk away from this family. I didn't flinch. It's not a threat, Dad. It's reality. I've been carrying the weight of Jason's screw-ups for years. Every time he crashes and burns, you two expect me to step in, drive him around, lend him money, cover bills, talk him through things. And I've done it, but I'm not doing it anymore. Not when you're about to hand him thousands of dollars that we all know he'll waste. Jason pushed back his chair. You think you're better than me? Huh? Just because you've got a boring desk job and a steady paycheck? You're jealous. That's all this is. Jealous. I repeated, almost laughing. Jason, there's nothing to be jealous of. You've never stuck with anything in your life. You talk big about plans, but when it comes time to put in the actual work, you disappear. And then when everything falls apart, Mom and Dad swoop in like you're some poor victim. Meanwhile, Emily and I are out here grinding just to be taken seriously. Emily chimed in, her voice sharper than I'd ever heard it. Exactly. When I needed money for textbooks, you guys told me you couldn't help. When Tyler needed a loan for his car repairs, you told him to figure it out on his own. But Jason shows up with a half-baked idea, and suddenly you've got $5,000 lying around? Do you realize how insulting that is? My mom finally spoke, her voice trembling. You two have to understand. Jason's had a hard time. Life hasn't been easy for him. I slammed my hand on the table again, not to intimidate her, but to stop her from saying what I already knew was coming. Life hasn't been easy for any of us, Mom. The difference is that we deal with it. Jason runs away from it, and you let him. Jason stood up so fast his chair toppled over. You think you're some kind of saint? You're not perfect, Tyler. You made mistakes too. Yeah, I have, I said evenly. But at least I own them. At least I fixed them. You don't. For a moment, I thought he might actually swing at me. His fists were clenched, his face was red, and he looked ready to explode. But instead, he stormed out of the dining room, his footsteps echoing down the hallway before the front door slammed shut behind him. The three of us sat there in the aftermath, the turkey on the table growing cold. My mom was sniffling, my dad looked furious, and Emily just looked drained. You didn't have to humiliate him, my dad muttered finally. I stared at him in disbelief. Humiliate him? Dad, he's 29 years old. He's not a kid anymore, and you're still treating him like one. That's why he's never grown up. You're being cruel, my mom whispered. No, I said firmly. I'm being honest, and maybe that's what this family needs for once. The rest of the night was tense. Jason didn't come home, my parents gave me the cold shoulder, and Emily stuck close to me, whispering later that she'd never seen me stand up to Dad like that. The next morning, things escalated again. Jason returned, looking disheveled and angry. He stomped into the living room where we were all gathered and threw down his laptop bag. You know what? Forget it. If none of you believe in me, then I'll find people who do. I don't need your money. I'll figure it out myself. My dad, trying to save face, said, Son, nobody said we don't believe in you. Jason cut him off. Don't bother. Tyler made it clear what he thinks. And Emily too. You guys want me to fail. You always have. That was so absurd that Emily laughed bitterly. Jason, no one wants you to fail. We just want you to stop dragging the rest of us down with you. Jason's eyes darted between us, then back to my parents. See? They hate me, and you're letting them treat me like garbage. If you don't have my back, then I don't need to be here. And just like that, he packed a bag and left again. For the next 2 weeks, we didn't hear much from him. My mom cried almost every night, worried sick. My dad tried to act tough, saying Jason needed space to figure himself out, but I caught him pacing around late at night, clearly worried too. Emily and I kept our distance from the drama as much as possible, but there was this heavy cloud over the whole house. Then came the bombshell. One evening, Jason came back, this time not alone. He brought a girlfriend none of us had ever heard about before. Her name was Ashley, and she looked tired. Not just physically tired, but emotionally drained. She barely said a word as Jason paraded her around, introducing her like some trophy. This is Ashley, he said proudly. She believes in me. Unlike some people here, Ashley gave us a weak smile, but her eyes told a different story. She looked like she'd been dragged into something she didn't fully understand. Over the next week, we learned that Jason had moved in with Ashley after storming out, and apparently, she had been covering his expenses while he worked on his business idea. My stomach turned when I realized he was using her the same way he'd been using us. Emily confronted him one night when he was back at the house. So let me get this straight. You're mooching off your girlfriend now? That's your big plan. Jason snapped at her, Don't talk about her like that. She's supportive, something you'll never understand. But Ashley's face said everything. She looked ashamed, trapped. It all came to a head 2 weeks later when Ashley showed up at our house alone. She sat in our living room, wringing her hands, her eyes red from crying. "I don't know what to do," she admitted. Jason promised he had a plan, but he hasn't done anything. He just sits around all day, talks about big ideas, and expects me to pay for everything. I can't keep doing it. I thought maybe you'd understand. My mom was horrified. My dad looked like someone had just punched him. Emily sat forward, her voice gentle. "Ashley, you don't owe him your life. If he's dragging you down, you have every right to walk away." Ashley burst into tears. "I feel guilty. He says if I leave, he has nothing, that I'd be ruining his future." That was classic Jason, guilt-tripping, manipulating, twisting things to get sympathy. And that's when I made a decision. "Then maybe he needs to hit rock bottom," I said quietly. "Because as long as there's always someone willing to bail him out, he'll never change. Not you, not mom and dad, not me, not Emily. He's got to face the consequences of his choices." Ashley looked at me with wide, tearful eyes. My mom whispered my name, but I ignored her. Emily nodded firmly. For the first time in years, I felt like I was finally seeing the truth of it all. Jason wasn't going to change until he had no choice. And if that meant letting him fall, then so be it. Ashley broke up with him a few days later. He raged, called us all traitors, said he never wanted to see us again. But this time, nobody chased after him, not even my parents. It's been months now. We get the occasional text from him, usually some half-hearted attempt at guilt-tripping or asking for money, but my parents don't give it anymore. Emily and I stood our ground, and eventually they realized we were right. Jason's still out there somewhere, trying to figure out his next move. Maybe one day he'll grow up. Maybe not. But for the first time in my life, I'm not carrying that weight anymore. And you know what? That feels like freedom. If you've ever had to deal with a golden child sibling who drags the whole family into their chaos, I get it. It's exhausting, it's painful, but sometimes the only way forward is to stop saving them. Because saving them only teaches them that they'll never have to save themselves. If you want more stories like this one, the kind that pull you right into the middle of family chaos and drama, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. You'll never miss the next story that'll keep you hooked from start to finish. I was sitting in my car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white, trying to decide whether to walk into that house or just keep driving. My parents had insisted I come home for a family dinner, saying it was important, saying everyone would be there. But I already knew what that meant. It meant another night of pretending everything was fine. Another night of watching my younger brother, Ryan, soak up all the praise while I sat there like a stranger in my own family. Another night of biting my tongue while my parents acted like he walked on water. I took a deep breath, finally stepped out of the car, and walked up the front steps. The house looked the same as always. Fresh paint on the porch, flower pots that my mom obsessively tended, wind chimes gently swaying. To anyone else, it would look warm and welcoming. To me, it felt like a stage set, carefully arranged for appearances. When I opened the door, I was immediately greeted with laughter. Ryan's voice, loud, booming, confident. "Of course. There's my big shot," my dad said as he clapped Ryan on the back. "We were just talking about your new promotion." "Promotion?" I hadn't heard about that. "Yeah," Ryan said with a smirk, glancing at me as I stepped inside. "Regional manager now. Whole team under me. Big deal, you know." My mom gasped like she hadn't already heard the news. "Ryan, that's incredible. You've always been destined for great things. We're so proud of you." Meanwhile, I was still standing in the doorway, ignored. "Hi, everyone," I muttered, closing the door. "Oh, hey," my dad said casually, barely looking at me. "Grab a plate. Dinner's almost ready." I forced a smile, but inside, the bitterness was bubbling. I wasn't jealous of Ryan's success. I had a good job too, steady income, benefits, the kind of stability people usually admire. But in my family, stability didn't matter. Ryan was the golden boy. He could light the house on fire, and they'd still find a way to praise him for being passionate. We sat down for dinner, and, as always, the conversation revolved around Ryan. His job, his apartment, his girlfriend, his plans for the future. Every detail was celebrated. "Do you know Ryan just bought a brand new car?" my mom asked, her eyes sparkling. "It's gorgeous. You should see it." Ryan leaned back in his chair, grinning. "Yeah, leather seats, top of the line. I figured I deserved it, you know? Hard work pays off." I stabbed at my food with my fork, keeping quiet. "I bought a car last year too, but no one cared. They barely noticed." Emily, my younger cousin who was visiting, broke the silence. "So what about you, Alex? How's work going?" I looked up, startled. It was the first time anyone had asked me all night. "It's good," I said cautiously. "I got a raise recently, actually." "Oh, that's nice," my mom said absent-mindedly, already turning back to Ryan. "So, Ryan, tell us more about your new office. Is it bigger than your old one?" I felt the air leave my lungs. It was like I was invisible. The conversation carried on, but I tuned it out. I watched Ryan bask in the attention, watched my parents hang on his every word, and felt something inside me snap. When dessert was served, I finally spoke up. "Do you guys even realize how lopsided this is? Every time we get together, it's all about Ryan. Everything he does is amazing. Everything I do is nothing. Do you even see me sitting here?" The room went silent. My mom blinked at me like I'd just spoken a foreign language. My dad frowned, clearly annoyed. "Alex," he said sharply, "don't start this again." Again, I laughed bitterly. "So you admit I've said this before, and nothing's changed. Do you know how it feels to be treated like the background character in your own family? To have everything you accomplish brushed aside while Ryan gets parades thrown for him?" Ryan rolled his eyes. "Oh, here we go. The jealousy speech. Classic." "It's not jealousy," I snapped. "It's about fairness. Respect. You act like Ryan's perfect, but do you ever notice how he brags about things that aren't even that special? Half of the stuff he accomplishes comes from luck or people bailing him out." Ryan's smirk vanished. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, I do," I said coldly. "You remember last year? The car accident? Dad paid for your repairs. Or when you messed up at work and almost got fired. Mom made calls to smooth things over. You don't succeed on your own, Ryan. You succeed because they bend the world for you." My mom gasped. "Alex, how dare you talk like that? How dare I?" I shot back. "How dare you keep enabling him while acting like the rest of us don't exist? You think you're helping him, but you're not. You're just feeding his ego while teaching the rest of us that no matter what we do, it'll never be enough." Emily shifted uncomfortably in her seat, clearly regretting that she'd opened this can of worms by asking me about work. My dad slammed his hand on the table. "Enough. We're not doing this tonight." But it was too late. The truth was out, and judging by Ryan's glare, this was only the beginning of the fight. The silence after my dad slammed his hand down was thick, suffocating. Everyone at the table stared at me like I'd just thrown a grenade into the middle of dinner. In a way, maybe I had. "Alex," my mom finally said, her voice trembling with controlled anger. "You need to stop this. You're being cruel. Ryan has worked so hard for everything he's achieved, and instead of supporting him, you're tearing him down." "Worked hard," I repeated, my voice dripping with disbelief. "Do you even hear yourselves? Anytime Ryan lifts a finger, you call it hard work. Anytime I accomplish something, it's barely a footnote. You can't even look me in the eye and say you're proud of me. Can you? When's the last time you said that, Mom? Dad?" They exchanged a glance, but said nothing. That silence hit me harder than any words could have. Ryan leaned forward, his smirk replaced by something darker. "You sound pathetic, Alex. Honestly, if you want attention so badly, maybe you should actually achieve something worth noticing." That cut deep, deeper than I wanted to admit. My jaw tightened, my chest burning. "You think you're better than me, don't you?" I shot back. "You've always thought that. But deep down, you know I'm right. Without Mom and Dad holding your hand, you wouldn't be half as successful as you are." Ryan pushed his chair back, standing up. "Say that again." I stood too, meeting his glare. "Without them, you wouldn't make it." The tension was unbearable. My mom rushed to her feet, placing a hand on Ryan's arm. "Sit down, both of you. This is ridiculous. We're a family." But I wasn't sitting. Not this time. "I'm tired of being invisible," I said, my voice breaking despite my effort to keep it strong. I'm tired of being the afterthought, the one you barely acknowledge. You say we're family, but family doesn't mean playing favorites until someone feels like they don't belong. My dad's expression hardened. If you can't handle being part of this family, Alex, maybe you shouldn't come around so often. It felt like a slap in the face. My stomach dropped, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. Wow, I whispered. So that's it. You'd rather cut me out than admit you've treated me unfairly. No one's cutting you out, my mom said quickly, her voice panicked. That's not what your father meant. But the damage was done. My dad had said the quiet part out loud. Ryan crossed his arms, clearly enjoying my pain. Maybe you should just get over yourself. Life's not fair. You're not always going to be the center of attention. I wanted to hit him. God, I wanted to wipe that smug expression off his face. But instead, I forced myself to step back. You're right about one thing, I said quietly. Life's not fair, and it's definitely not fair in this family. But you know what? I don't need your approval anymore. I'm done chasing it. With that, I turned and walked out. I could hear my mom calling my name, but I didn't stop. I grabbed my coat, my keys, and left the house. The cold night air hit me like a wave as I stumbled onto the porch. My hands shook as I fumbled with the keys. The tears I've been holding back all evening finally spilled over, blurring my vision. For years, I had convinced myself that if I just worked harder, achieved more, they'd notice me. That I'd finally hear the words I'd been craving. We're proud of you, Alex. But I realized in that moment that it was never going to happen. No matter what I did, Ryan would always be the golden child, and I'd always be the shadow. When I got home, I collapsed onto the couch, my chest aching. I replayed the night over and over in my head, wondering if I'd gone too far, if I'd made things worse. But then I thought about the look on my dad's face when he basically told me to stay away, and the anger flared again. Why was it always on me to keep the peace? Why was I expected to swallow my feelings while Ryan got away with everything? For once, I'd spoken my truth. And maybe it had cost me my family's approval, but maybe it would also set me free. The next morning, I woke up to a string of messages from my mom. Alex, please call me. We need to talk. Last night got out of hand. You know your father didn't mean it like that. Please don't shut us out. I love you. There was nothing from my dad. Nothing from Ryan. I didn't reply. Not yet. I needed space. At work, I tried to focus, but my mind kept drifting. My coworker and friend, Jenna, noticed. You okay? You look like you've been hit by a truck. I gave a humorless laugh. Family dinner. She winced. Say no more. But seriously, you look wrecked. Want to talk about it? So I did. For the first time in a long time, I let it all out. How my parents constantly favored Ryan. How invisible I felt. How last night everything exploded. Jenna listened quietly, then shook her head. That's brutal. But honestly, good for you for standing up for yourself. Sometimes people need to hear the hard truth, even if they don't want to. Yeah, but what if I ruined everything? I asked. What if I can't go back now? Then maybe that's not such a bad thing, she said gently. You don't owe them your silence, and you definitely don't owe them your sanity. You're allowed to walk away from people who hurt you, even if they're family. Her words stuck with me. A week passed before I heard from Ryan. He called me out of the blue, his tone smug as ever. Still sulking? He asked. I nearly hung up, but something stopped me. What do you want, Ryan? I just wanted to let you know that Mom and Dad aren't happy with you. You really hurt them, Alex. You should probably apologize. I laughed bitterly. Of course, because God forbid Ryan takes responsibility for anything. You're impossible, he snapped. You can't stand that I'm successful, so you lash out. It's pathetic. You're wrong, I said firmly. I don't envy you, Ryan. I pity you. You think their approval makes you strong, but it doesn't. It makes you weak. You can't stand on your own without them propping you up. One day, when they're not there to bail you out, you'll realize how hollow it all is. There was silence on the line. For once, Ryan didn't have a comeback. Then he muttered, "Screw you," and hung up. I stared at the phone, my heart racing, but also lighter. The weeks that followed were quiet. My mom reached out a few more times, asking me to come to another dinner to talk things through, but I wasn't ready. I needed distance. I needed to figure out who I was without constantly being compared to Ryan. And slowly, I started to feel better. I poured myself into work, into friendships, into building a life that wasn't defined by my family's approval. It wasn't easy. There were nights when the loneliness hit hard, when I wondered if I'd made a huge mistake. But there was also freedom. Freedom in finally putting myself first. One night, Jenna and I went out for drinks, and as I laughed at one of her jokes, I realized something. This was what it felt like to be seen, to be valued, to be enough. Maybe my family would never change. Maybe Ryan would always be the golden boy. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't chasing their validation anymore. I was building my own, and that, I realized, was worth more than anything. If you're still here listening, it means the story connected with you in some way. Do me a favor, hit like and subscribe. It keeps me going and helps me bring you more stories that matter. I never thought a single phone call could turn my whole world upside down, but that Tuesday morning proved me wrong. I was halfway through my coffee when my sister, Lily, called. Her voice sounded frantic, the kind of panic that makes your stomach twist in knots before you even know why. "Emma, you need to come home. Now," she said, barely pausing to breathe. "Whoa, slow down," I said, setting my mug down. "What happened?" "It's Mom and Dad. Just come." Her voice cracked. That was enough. I dropped my work bag, grabbed my coat, and ran out the door, my mind racing with every possible scenario. By the time I reached my childhood home, the front yard was eerily silent. Not even the usual bark from our neighbor's dog. I fumbled with my keys, rushed inside, and immediately felt the tension in the air. It was suffocating. Mom was sitting at the dining table, her hands tightly clasped together, staring at nothing. Dad was pacing behind her, muttering under his breath. And then I saw him, my younger brother, Jake. His usual cocky smirk was gone, replaced by something I didn't recognize: fear. "What's going on?" I demanded, my voice louder than I intended. Mom jumped slightly. "Emma, thank God you're here." Dad finally turned toward me, his face pale. It's Lily. She's at the hospital." The words barely registered before my stomach dropped. "Hospital? What happened? Is she okay?" Mom shook her head. She collapsed at work. "They don't know exactly what's wrong yet." I felt my knees go weak. "Oh my God." Jake, who had been silent, finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's complicated. They think it might be something serious." Complicated? My brain refused to keep up. "What do you mean complicated? How is it complicated?" Dad sighed heavily, rubbing his temples. "Emma, it's her health, her insurance. It's all a mess. She's in critical condition right now, and we might need to make decisions we aren't prepared for." I felt like someone had punched me in the gut. Lily, my little sister, lying in a hospital bed, and me feeling helpless because she wasn't answering her phone. "I'm going to the hospital," I said firmly. Mom shook her head. "We should all go together." The drive to the hospital felt endless. Every red light, every turn made my heart pound faster. I couldn't stop thinking about all the times Lily had teased me growing up, all the arguments we had, all the times I'd wished I'd been a better sister. When we finally arrived, we were met by a nurse who ushered us into a small waiting room. "Ms. Carter," she asked, looking at my mom. "She's stable for now, but she had a severe reaction to her medication. We're monitoring her closely. The doctors are assessing the next steps." My stomach churned. Medication reaction? Lily had been healthy, at least as far as I knew. Dad sank into a chair, head in hands. "How could this happen?" he muttered. Mom squeezed his shoulder. "It's not anyone's fault. We just have to be here for her." I paced the room, unable to sit still. Every second that ticked by was unbearable. I felt like I was waiting for a bomb to explode. Then Jake spoke, breaking the heavy silence. "Emma, there's something you should know." I stopped pacing, my heart skipping a beat. "What?" He hesitated. "It's not just a reaction. They found something else. Something that's been developing for a while. And it might be genetic." I froze. "Genetic?" He nodded. "Yeah, like it runs in the family." I didn't know how to tell you, but Mom and Dad, it didn't tell us everything about our family history. My mind spun. Everything suddenly made sense. The vague mentions from our parents, the late-night hushed conversations I'd overheard as a kid, the mysterious illnesses that seemed to crop up in our extended family. And now it was here, knocking on our door with terrifying intensity. The nurse returned. We're going to take her for some scans and tests. You'll need to wait here. I sank into a chair, gripping the armrests as if they could anchor me to reality. Lily had always been the one full of life, the one who could light up a room just by walking in. And now, she was lying in a hospital bed, fighting for her life. I didn't know how long I sat there, lost in a fog of fear and helplessness. When Dad finally spoke, it broke me out of my daze. "Emma, we need to prepare for every possibility," he said quietly. "We don't know what's coming." The words hit me harder than anything. I nodded, but inside I felt numb. Hours passed. Finally, the doctor came out. She looked tired but composed. "Ms. Carter, Mr. Carter, Emma," she began. "Lily's tests have confirmed a serious condition. It's treatable, but it will require immediate intervention and careful monitoring. She's strong, but we need to act quickly." Relief and fear collided inside me. She was strong, yes, but fragile. So fragile. That night, as I sat in the waiting room while Lily underwent her procedure, my mind wandered back to all the times I had let petty fights with her overshadow our bond. I remembered her laughter, her relentless teasing, the way she always defended me when I was too scared to speak up. I made a silent promise. No matter what happened next, I would be there for her. I wouldn't let fear or resentment get in the way. Hours later, the nurse came out. The procedure went well. She's in recovery, and we'll know more in the morning. You can see her soon. I felt a weight lift from my chest, but it was replaced by a resolve I hadn't felt before. This family, was messy, complicated, and frustrating. But in moments like this, it was also precious. When I finally saw Lily, her eyes fluttering open, she smiled weakly. "Hey, big sister," she whispered. I grabbed her hand. "Hey, you scared the hell out of me." She chuckled faintly. "Sorry, guess I needed some attention." I laughed through my tears. "You got it, idiot. You got it." And in that moment, as fragile as she looked, as fragile as our family sometimes was, I realized something important. Love doesn't always make sense, and family isn't always perfect. But when it counts, it matters more than anything. That night, I called my mom to check on her, and we talked long into the evening about the past, our regrets, and the moments we'd overlooked. I could hear the exhaustion in her voice, but also the relief. Somehow, surviving this storm together was strengthening bonds we didn't even know were fragile. I looked at Lily, sleeping peacefully, and I knew we'd all come out stronger. Life would still throw punches. Misunderstandings would still happen. But this was a reminder of what mattered. I felt a weight lift from my chest, but it was replaced by a resolve I hadn't felt before. This family, was messy, complicated, and frustrating. But in moments like this, it was also precious. When I finally saw Lily, her eyes fluttering open, she smiled weakly. "Hey, big sister," she whispered. I grabbed her hand. "Hey, you scared the hell out of me." She chuckled faintly. "Sorry, guess I needed some attention." I laughed through my tears. "You got it, idiot. You got it." And in that moment, as fragile as she looked, as fragile as our family sometimes was, I realized something important. Love doesn't always make sense, and family isn't always perfect. But when it counts, it matters more than anything. That night, I called my mom to check on her, and we talked long into the evening about the past, our regrets, and the moments we'd overlooked. I could hear the exhaustion in her voice, but also the relief. Somehow, surviving this storm together was strengthening bonds we didn't even know were fragile. I looked at Lily, sleeping peacefully, and I knew we'd all come out stronger. Life would still throw punches. Misunderstandings would still happen. But this was a reminder of what mattered. The tension in the house didn't ease all morning. Every time I tried to start a normal conversation, my parents' eyes would flicker somewhere else, and I could feel the weight of unspoken words pressing down on me. By noon, I knew I couldn't avoid it any longer. I walked to the living room, where Dad was scrolling through his phone, his brow furrowed. "Dad, just tell me, what happened with Lily?" I asked, my voice steady, though my stomach churned. He hesitated, looking up at me with tired eyes. "It's complicated. She got involved with some people she shouldn't have. At first, it seemed harmless, friends from work, but then, well, let's just say it escalated quickly." My mind raced. Lily had always been the responsible one at school, the one who got good grades and kept her circle small. Are we talking about money trouble? Legal trouble? Dad shook his head. Both. I sank into the couch. How bad is it? Mom joined us, sitting across from me, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She made some choices that could ruin her career and possibly even her future. We're trying to fix it, but we need your help too. I felt my chest tighten. My help? What can I do? Dad looked at me, a mixture of guilt and hope in his eyes. We need someone she trusts to talk to her, someone who can really get through to her. She's stubborn, but you've always had a connection with her. She listens to you. I nodded, swallowing hard. Okay, I'll do it. Later that afternoon, I found Lily in her room, headphones on, staring blankly at her laptop. She didn't notice me at first. I sat on the edge of her bed, waiting for her to look up. Finally, she did, her eyes red-rimmed. Hey. Her voice was quiet, almost defeated. Hey, I said softly. Can we talk? She sighed and pulled off her headphones. About what? Everything, I said. I know about the trouble at work, and I want to help, but I need to know what happened first. She hesitated, then began, almost in a whisper. It started with just hanging out with some co-workers after hours. Drinks, dinners. I didn't think much of it. But then they started asking me to do favors, little things at first, nothing big. I didn't see the red flags. I listened carefully, nodding. What kind of favors? Small at first, covering shifts, lying about deadlines, but then it escalated. They needed me to bend rules, hide mistakes, even cover up financial mistakes. I tried to say no, but I didn't want to lose their friendship, and I didn't want to look like the bad guy. I could feel the guilt radiating off her. So what happened next? They threatened me. Not directly, but enough to make me scared. And I messed up. I agreed to things I shouldn't have, just to keep things calm. And now, my boss found out, and the HR department is involved. I might lose my job, and it could go on my record. My stomach dropped. I had always known Lily was strong, but I could see how scared and trapped she felt. You didn't do this alone, Lily. None of this is just on you. But we need a plan to fix it. We spent the next few hours mapping out our next steps. Contacting HR to explain the situation honestly, documenting everything, and getting a lawyer involved. I promised to be with her every step of the way. Over the next few days, the tension in the house shifted. Mom and Dad tried to give Lily space while still supporting her, and I stayed close, helping her draft emails, rehearse conversations, and keep her confidence up. It wasn't easy. There were moments of panic, nights she cried silently, and days she didn't want to get out of bed. But she started to fight back, slowly regaining control over her life. One evening, after a particularly long day of meetings and calls with HR, she looked at me and said, "I don't know how I'd get through this without you." I smiled, trying to hide my own relief. That's what family is for. We have each other's backs, no matter what. By the end of the week, Lily had taken the first steps toward clearing her record and repairing her reputation. It was just the beginning, but it felt like a real start. We celebrated quietly at home, the four of us sitting together, sharing a simple dinner. For the first time in days, the tension seemed to lift. Watching her smile, even a little, I realized how fragile life could be and how easily it could spiral out of control. But I also realized how much strength could come from the people who truly care about you, who refuse to let you face your battles alone. We didn't talk about the incident at work again that night. We just sat together, enjoying each other's presence. And as I watched my sister laugh at something Dad said, I felt a sense of hope that I hadn't felt in a long time. If you enjoyed following Lily's journey, her struggles and victories, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps me motivated to bring more real, gripping family stories like this straight to you. The first thing I noticed was the way her smile lingered a second too long, the way her laughter seemed directed at someone I couldn't see. At first, I chalked it up to her being friendly. She'd always been that way, but deep down, something in my chest tightened, a warning I couldn't ignore. I met Jenna at work, and for months, everything had been normal. We got along, joked around, shared coffee breaks, and sometimes stayed late to finish projects. But lately, the little changes started to pile up. The phone she kept on silent, the quick glances at messages she didn't show me, and the sudden enthusiasm for late team outings that she never mentioned until the last minute. I tried to brush it off. Maybe I was overthinking. Maybe it was just stress. But a nagging voice in my head told me otherwise. One evening, I came home earlier than usual. I wanted to surprise her with dinner, thinking a simple gesture could ease the tension that had been building between us. When I opened the door, the house was unusually quiet. I called her name. No answer. I checked the living room. Empty. Then I noticed the faint light under the bedroom door. I hesitated, my heart hammering. I knocked lightly. "Jenna? You home?" No reply. I pushed the door open, and the scene froze me in place. Her laptop was open, a chat window glowing, and the messages were intimate. Not just friendly, but the kind of messages that made your stomach twist and your blood run cold. I stepped back, my mind racing. Who was this? How long had it been going on? I sank into the chair, trying to process the words on the screen. The messages were filled with jokes, flirtation, and plans she had never mentioned to me. I felt betrayed, shocked, and sick all at once. I didn't want to confront her immediately. Part of me needed to understand the full picture before reacting. I spent the night scrolling through the chat history, piecing together the timeline of secrets she'd kept. The dates, the late-night texts, the quick dismissals when I asked about her day, they all added up. By morning, I had a clearer sense of what had been happening, and I knew a confrontation was inevitable. But I also knew I had to approach it carefully. I couldn't just explode, I needed answers. When Jenna finally came home that afternoon, I was sitting on the couch, her laptop closed beside me. She smiled, unaware of the storm that was brewing. "Hey, how was your day?" she asked casually. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my voice. "We need to talk." Her smile faltered, just slightly, but enough to make me wonder if she had anticipated this moment. About everything," I said. "About the messages, the secrets, the late nights you never explained." Her eyes widened, and for a moment, I thought she might try to deny it. But then the tension in her shoulders shifted, and she sat down across from me, finally silent. I didn't know how to tell you," she admitted, her voice small. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. It started as just texting, harmless flirting, and I didn't realize it would become something more." I felt my chest tighten. "Something more? Jenna, this isn't small. This isn't harmless. You've been emotionally cheating, lying to me every step of the way." Tears welled up in her eyes. "I know, and I hate myself for it. I never wanted to hurt you. I didn't know how to stop once it started." I leaned back, trying to process the weight of her words. Part of me wanted to scream, to throw her phone across the room, to make her feel the betrayal I felt. But another part, maybe the part that loved her once so completely, wanted to understand why. "Why, Jenna? Why him? Why now?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She shook her head, covering her face. "I don't know. I guess I was lonely, and he made me feel wanted, appreciated in ways I felt I wasn't here. I know it sounds awful. I know it's a betrayal, but I didn't plan for it to happen like this." I ran a hand through my hair, the anger and hurt battling with the empathy I still felt. I didn't know how to respond. I wanted answers, clarity, and yet I also knew that whatever came next would determine the future of our relationship. We spent hours talking that night. Every lie she had told, every text she had hidden, every moment she had spent in secret, it all came out. And as much as I hated the situation, I also began to see cracks in her own life. Cracks that had made her vulnerable and led her down this path. By midnight, exhaustion had set in, but so had a strange clarity. I needed to decide what I could live with and what I couldn't. Trust, once broken, wasn't easy to rebuild, but I also knew that hasty decisions made in anger rarely led to lasting resolutions. Jenna looked at me then, her eyes pleading for understanding, for forgiveness, for a chance. I took a deep breath. "We need time," I said. "Time to figure out if we can fix this, if we can even move forward without it destroying us." She nodded, a mix of relief and sorrow in her expression. "I'll do whatever it takes." The rest of the night was quiet, filled with a tentative hope, but also a heavy uncertainty. I knew the road ahead would be rocky. The coming days would test our patience, our communication, and our ability to trust again. But one thing was clear. The path forward wouldn't be easy, and it certainly wouldn't be the same as before. And so, I went to bed that night with a heart heavy with betrayal, yet cautiously aware that even in the darkest situations, there was a possibility of understanding, growth, and maybe, even if just barely, a chance to rebuild what had been broken. The next morning, the air felt heavier than usual. Jenna and I didn't speak right away. We moved around the house silently, like careful dancers avoiding broken glass. Even after hours of talking the night before, the wounds felt raw. I wasn't sure if I could trust her again, and she seemed equally unsure of how to reassure me. I spent the morning trying to focus on work, but every little ping of my phone made my stomach twist. Messages from her, from him? Each notification felt like a potential dagger. I knew I needed to confront the lingering questions, not just the past actions. Finally, I called her into the living room. She sat down, hands fidgeting, and I could see the anxiety written all over her face. "I want to know everything," I said. "No omissions. No sugarcoating. I need the truth, Jenna. Can you do that?" She nodded immediately, a flicker of relief passing over her features. "Yes, I owe you that much. And more, honestly." We went through every interaction she had with him. The messages, the calls, the moments of attention she had given that weren't mine. Some of it was minor, some of it crossed lines I never thought she would cross. And as the hours passed, a complicated storm of emotions overtook me. Anger, betrayal, sadness, and a strange, lingering tenderness that reminded me why I loved her in the first place. "I understand why it happened," I said finally, my voice shaky. "But understanding doesn't make it okay. I need to know, do you want this to work? Or do you just feel guilty and want to ease your own conscience?" She looked me straight in the eyes. "I want us to work. I want to fix this, not just for me, but for us. I know it's going to take time, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to earn your trust back." Trust. That word hovered between us, fragile and almost impossible to grasp. I nodded slowly, though deep down I wasn't sure if it would ever feel whole again. Then we start slow, step by step. I can't promise everything will be fine overnight, but we can try. We agreed on boundaries, complete transparency, no more hidden messages, and honest discussions about feelings before they spiraled out of control. She promised to be patient with my reactions, and I promised to try to forgive without letting the anger fester too long. It was an uneasy truce, but it was a start. Over the next few days, Jenna and I spent more time together than ever. We revisited old memories, shared small gestures of care, and slowly tried to reconstruct the intimacy that had been shattered. There were moments when the pain would surge unexpectedly. Seeing her phone light up with a message, remembering a line from the previous night's chat, or even hearing a tone in her voice that reminded me of him. Each time, I reminded myself that healing wasn't linear, and the fact we were still trying counted for something. One evening, she cooked dinner while I set the table. The smell of garlic and herbs filled the kitchen, and I watched her with a strange mix of admiration and wariness. "I've missed this," I said, trying to smile. She laughed softly. "Missed what?" "Missed you. Just us. Even with everything, I've missed this." She stopped stirring for a moment and met my gaze, her expression unreadable but sincere. "I missed it too, more than I realized." That night, as we sat down to eat, I felt the tiniest crack of optimism. Maybe the road was long and uncertain, but at least we were walking it together. Over the following weeks, Jenna proved she was serious about rebuilding our relationship. She was transparent with her phone, honest about her thoughts, and genuinely focused on restoring trust. It wasn't easy. There were nights of tears, arguments about boundaries, and moments when doubt crept in, making me question if this could ever work. But we kept showing up for each other. Slowly, the intimacy we had lost began to resurface. Simple things, a touch on the hand, a quiet evening watching a movie, laughter over inside jokes, reminded me that beneath the mistakes, the bond we shared was real and deep. It didn't erase the past, but gave me hope that the future could still hold something meaningful. One evening, as we sat on the couch talking about plans for the weekend, I realized I was no longer fixated on the betrayal. The anger had dulled, replaced by cautious forgiveness and a desire to focus on the present. I reached over and took her hand. "I don't know if we'll ever forget everything," I said quietly, "but I do know I want to try with you. For real this time." She smiled, a mixture of relief and gratitude in her eyes. "I'll spend every day trying to prove it. I'll make it worth your trust." It wasn't a fairy tale ending. There were no sudden, magical resolutions. There was only the slow, deliberate work of two people committed to rebuilding something broken, learning how to forgive, and try to love more honestly than before. As we sat there, hands intertwined, I felt a sense of fragile hope. We had navigated the worst, and though the scars remained, they were a testament to survival, endurance, and the choice to try again even when everything seemed lost. And in that moment, I realized that love, real love, wasn't about perfection. It was about showing up, even when hurt, even when betrayed, and choosing each other every day. If you like this story, hit like and subscribe. It really motivates me to bring more stories like this straight to you. The first time I noticed things were off, it wasn't dramatic. It was subtle, tiny shifts in how my mom answered questions, the way my dad seemed to avoid her gaze at dinner, and the whispered phone calls that stopped the moment I walked into the room. At first, I brushed it off as normal family stress, but a quiet suspicion started to settle in like dust over the furniture. Life had been chaotic lately. My older brother had just moved out, and my little sister was obsessed with school and friends, leaving me to navigate the middle ground of chores, responsibilities, and my own personal frustrations. I thought I understood my parents. They had been together for decades, but something in the air that spring felt different, almost electric, like tension was brewing just beneath the surface. One evening, I returned from school early to find my dad in the garage, working on his old car. I leaned against the doorframe, hoping for a casual greeting, but instead, he seemed tense, almost nervous. Just doing some work," he said, avoiding eye contact. "What's up?" I asked, tilting my head. "Nothing," he replied quickly, and went back to wiping grease off his hands. Something about the way he said it made my gut tighten. I didn't want to pry, but the next few days confirmed my suspicion. My mom started leaving the house more often, always saying she was running errands, sometimes coming home later than usual. I noticed her phone buzzing constantly, and though she didn't talk much about it, I could see the way she quickly hid the screen whenever I walked in. Curiosity and worry collided, leaving me restless. One afternoon, I stayed home from school to surprise her, thinking maybe I could catch her in a moment of honesty. I hid in the living room, pretending to read a book as she returned with a bag of groceries. "Hey, I got some things for dinner," she said cheerfully, placing the bag down. But her smile didn't reach her eyes. She fumbled with her phone, trying to lock it as quickly as possible. My suspicion deepened. Over the next week, I watched closely, piecing together a pattern. Long walks with friends she never introduced, whispered conversations over the phone, and moments where she seemed distracted even while sitting at the dinner table. It wasn't the betrayal of physical infidelity that scared me. It was the secrecy, the breaking of trust that left me anxious and unsure of my place in our family. I decided to confront her, but I didn't know how. My mind ran through countless scenarios, angry accusations, tears, defensive arguments, but none seemed right. I needed clarity, not chaos. One evening, after everyone had gone to bed, I approached her in the kitchen. "Mom, can we talk?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. She froze, her hand hovering over the coffee maker. "Of course, what's wrong?" "I've noticed things," I said slowly. "You've been acting differently. Staying out late, secretive phone calls. I just want to understand. What's going on?" Her face shifted from surprise to something heavier. Guilt, maybe, or shame. She sighed and sank into a chair, her hands clasped tightly. "I didn't want you to find out this way," she admitted. I've been seeing someone." The words hit me like a thunderclap. My mother, who I thought was devoted to our family, was keeping a relationship outside of our home. My mind raced, trying to process the complexity of it all. "But, Dad?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she said, tears brimming. I felt lonely, and it just started. I never wanted to hurt him, or you. But it's been months, and I feel trapped in my own mistakes. For a moment, silence filled the room, thick and suffocating. I wanted to scream, cry, even run away, but I stayed. I realized that my reaction wouldn't change the past, but how I handled this moment could affect the family's future. We talked for hours, my mother confessing every detail, how she met him, how the feelings developed, the guilt she carried every day. She didn't justify her actions. She simply laid out the truth, raw and unfiltered. It was painful, yes, but also oddly liberating. The secrecy had been its own kind of prison, and admitting it felt like the first step toward breaking free. Over the following days, I watched our family navigate this new reality. My father was hurt, obviously, but also pragmatic. He wanted answers, but he also wanted to preserve the family if possible. Conversations were difficult, tearful, angry, desperate, but they were real. For the first time in weeks, the tension in the house felt alive rather than suffocating. I realized that betrayal doesn't just affect the person directly involved. It ripples outward, touching everyone in its wake. My siblings noticed the shift too, asking questions in hushed tones, observing the subtle changes in our parents' interactions. I felt like the anchor, the one who had to absorb and process the weight of everyone else's emotions while still figuring out my own. Despite the chaos, moments of normalcy began to peek through. Family dinners were still a thing. Laughter still found its way into the house, and my mom tried to rebuild trust by being present, transparent, and accountable. It wasn't perfect, and I knew it never would be again, but it was something I could hold on to. By the end of the month, things had settled into a fragile rhythm. My mother had ended the outside relationship, choosing to focus on the family, and my father had reluctantly agreed to work on forgiveness. I knew it wouldn't be easy. They had years of history and wounds to heal, but for the first time, I sensed hope. I realized that family wasn't about perfection. It was about facing the mistakes, confronting the uncomfortable truths, and choosing to try again, even when it hurt. That understanding made me feel older, wiser, and oddly grateful. The weeks that followed my mom's confession felt like walking on a tightrope. Each step I took inside the house required balance, vigilance, and emotional endurance. There were mornings when I'd hear my father moving around in the kitchen, the sound of plates clinking like a signal flare of tension. My mom, meanwhile, tried to act normal, but even her laughter seemed rehearsed, like she was afraid of letting the weight of her actions show. I found myself caught in the middle, my role unofficial but unavoidable. I wanted to support both of them, even when I felt my own trust shaken. My friends at school noticed my distraction, teasing me about being moody, but I couldn't explain what was happening at home. I kept it tucked away, like a fragile vase balanced on a shelf, knowing one wrong move could shatter everything. One Saturday, my father asked me to help him in the garage. He rarely called me in there these days, and I suspected it was a chance to talk, to test whether the tension had lifted. We worked in silence at first, fixing old tools and organizing boxes. The smell of motor oil mixed with sawdust, grounding me somehow. Finally, he spoke. "I know this has been hard," he said, not looking at me directly. "Hard on everyone. But I want you to know, I'm proud of how you've handled yourself. It's not easy watching things fall apart around you and still keeping it together." I shrugged, trying to act nonchalant, but the acknowledgement warmed me more than I expected. "Thanks. I don't want anyone to get hurt more than they already have." I replied quietly. "That's mature," he said, finally meeting my eyes. "But it's also okay to feel upset. You have to process it in your own way." His words lingered in my mind as the day progressed. I realized that healing wasn't about pretending everything was fine. It was about understanding that pain and forgiveness could coexist. I spent the afternoon talking with my sister, who was struggling to comprehend the shifts in our family dynamic. She was younger, but she had a keen sense of intuition, noticing the micro-expressions, the pauses in conversations, and the tension that hung like static in the air. "Do you think Mom and Dad can fix this?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "I don't know yet," I admitted. but I think they're trying, and that's what matters. That evening, dinner felt different. There were no sharp words, no cold silences. Instead, we talked about ordinary things, the weather, school, small jokes that had nothing to do with the chaos surrounding us. For a moment, I felt normal again, and it was a relief I hadn't realized I was craving. But life doesn't pause for healing. One afternoon, my mother received a call that left her visibly shaken. She sat at the kitchen table, gripping the phone, her knuckles white. When she hung up, she admitted the call was from the man she had been seeing, the one she had ended things with months ago. He wanted to meet, to talk, to work things out. I felt my stomach twist. The idea that her past could intrude on our fragile present was terrifying. My mom turned to me, eyes glistening. "I don't know what to do," she whispered. "Don't go," I said firmly. "You made a choice to stay with us. That's what matters now." She nodded, taking a deep breath. "You're right. I'll block him. I won't let him interfere." It was a small victory, but in the context of weeks of tension, it felt monumental. For the first time, I realized that family loyalty wasn't just about sticking together in easy times. It was about choosing each other when every part of the world seemed intent on pulling you apart. Over the next month, I noticed subtle changes. My mom smiled more freely, though cautiously. My dad seemed to let go of some of his resentment, though he still kept a careful eye on interactions. And I found my role shifting, not as a spy or mediator, but as a supportive observer, someone who could help hold the threads together while they try to rebuild. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky with streaks of orange and pink, I sat on the porch with my mom. We didn't speak much at first, just watched the colors shift and fade. Then she turned to me. "Thank you for being patient with me," she said softly. "I know I've hurt you, and your dad, and your sister. I don't expect everything to be perfect, but I promise I'll do my best." "I know," I said. I want us to be okay again." We sat in silence for a while, the weight of the past weeks settling around us like a blanket. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like warmth rather than suffocation. I realized that life isn't about avoiding mistakes. It's about how we handle them. My mom's betrayal had been painful, but it forced honesty, conversation, and self-reflection. Our family would carry scars, sure, but those scars could also serve as reminders of resilience, of choosing to face pain rather than hide from it. In the days that followed, the house seemed lighter. Arguments were replaced with discussions, accusations with explanations. My dad made an effort to share moments of humor with my mom, and she reciprocated with gestures of care and presence. My siblings joined in, slowly reclaiming the rhythm that had been disrupted. I noticed myself changing too. I became more empathetic, more aware of the fragility of trust and the strength required to rebuild it. I realized that families aren't perfect, but the bonds that hold them together are often stronger than we realize, even after betrayal. And as I lay in bed that night, listening to the faint sounds of my family in the other rooms, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. Hope that even when mistakes are made, honesty and effort can carve a path forward. Hope that relationships, fragile, complicated, and human, can survive if nurtured with care. I also learned something else, that the smallest gestures, sharing a laugh, helping with chores, a genuine apology, can sometimes mean more than grand declarations. Healing is quiet. It's not always dramatic. It's the slow, steady work of choosing to try again, every day. And now, if you enjoyed this story and want me to keep sharing more real-life family journeys with you, hit like and subscribe. It really motivates me to bring even more stories that reveal the complexities of life and relationships.